Okay, Mr. Kaczynski, would you please lead us in a pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Appreciate you all being here. So we're going to start off with a review of public comments. This time is reserved for members of the public to address their board relative to matters of the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority that is not on this agenda. No action may be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anybody wishing to take advantage of an opportunity for public comments, now's your time. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Bill Manofsky. I'm a ratepayer. I have a question for council. I would like to bring a document. Y'all might want to listen to this question.
You have no choice.
I have the 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, a handbook of understanding and implementing the law. Under Sigma fees, page 1, it breaks down. Let me get my other set of eyeballs on here. Implementing the requirements of the Sigma will cost money. A groundwater sustainability agency may impose 3 types of fees on groundwater pumpers. These include permit fees on groundwater extraction, fees to fund the cost of groundwater sustainability plan, fees to fund the investigations, inspections, compliance assistance, enforcement, and program administration, which I assume includes legal fees. And it goes to say a GSA cannot impose fees on de minimis pumpers under most circumstances. Can you clarify what under most circumstances means? Is there a possibility that de minimis users or pumpers, which does not include, I assume does not include ratepayers of the water district, will de minimis pumpers be asked to participate in the fees for the GSA?
Would you like me to answer?
Are you prepared to answer, or would you like some time?
I can give a general answer right now.
Why don't we satisfy him with a general answer, and if there's something we need to drill down on, we'll make a presentation about it next week's discussion.
First, I'm not the attorney for the JPA at this point. Not certain if we will be the attorney for the JPA. So this is just County Council's opinion. What this is saying is de minimis pumpers under most circumstances, and that is correct. Under most circumstances, de minimis pumpers are not going to be charged a fee. There will be some circumstances where maybe they are. I don't know if that's going to happen up here yet. That is such an abstract question at this stage that I couldn't tell you.
Thank you.
What I'm concerned with...
Excuse me, Mr. Manofsky, do you want a second question? Questions go to me, not to him.
To council.
No, questions go through me to council, so your questions are referred to me, and I'll authorize him to answer it.
All right. So you authorize his answers.
Correct.
So you can unauthorize an answer.
Is that your last question, sir?
No, that's not my question.
Please ask your question.
My last question is, so is it possible then that of the 3 potential sources for funding for this GSA, the ratepayers, the private well owners, and agriculture, we may see a different set of fees for each one of these groups?
I don't think that's a legal question at the present time. That's a policy question that needs to be developed with consult with the lawyers and the legal perspective on it. But those determinations have not been developed yet.
They have not been developed yet. All right, thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you, sir.
Judy Decker. Well, Mr. Gleason, this is your second groundwater Authority meeting, JPA, and already you have a problem. A week ago Wednesday, the City of Ridgecrest approved a large project, the casino, which has the potential to be an even larger project if the rest of the stages go through. There was absolutely no discussion by the council on the issue of overdraft, water supply, anything like that, imported water, nothing. As a matter of fact, the attorney for the city, Mr. Lemieux, stated that overdraft was an opinion.
Thank you.
Renee Westalusk, private citizen of Ridgecrest. I'm here basically with an announcement. I am working on a member of Congress who's on the House Armed Services Committee and campaigning for statewide office to visit Ridgecrest and China Lake before the November election. My question is, are any of the members of the IWVGA interested in meeting with this member of the House Armed Services Committee? Should they stop here, visit China Lake, and visit Ridgecrest? They have water finance experience as well as experience being on the House Armed Services Committee that would be relevant to our area.
Mrs. Westlusk, is this an elected person?
Yes, they're a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee.
If you would forward his name and his schedule, I'm sure we can get someone to spend time with him.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ron Kosinski. I know there's been a number of people up here questioning the authority of the board, that maybe they should be elected rather than the way it was put together. And I witnessed how I believe it's going to work, and correct me if I'm wrong, at the last Indian Wells Valley Water District meeting. As I see it, that as issues come up, that every member of this board will most likely take it back to their board for discussion and agreement on how it's going to be handled at this authority here. So with that in mind, it appears to me that we have, 5, 10, 25 elected officials looking at these issues. And so, if this was an elected body, I don't believe that would be so. So, the makeup looks like it's going to work. I think we need to make it work, because the fact that any issue, and I'm not sure how you can define what issues would go back to the board, but I don't think I would expect any one of you that represent me, whether it be at the City Council or at Indian Wells Water District, to make a direct decision here unless you brought it back to that board for full discussion and public comment. So I just want to say I witnessed that happening, and I believe that's going to happen at all. Now, that may slow things down, but I think you'll have a lot of input from a lot of the public. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, Harold Manis. I'm a private well owner, and I've been here about 30-some years. And I want to find out, beginning with that first question, about what you're defining as a well, as a pumper here. Now, if you're a single well owner and you're the only one on that well, you're not subject to this. Are you going to try to be coming around and putting taxes and controlling the amount of water that, we'll say, one person or one family uses on their well, and tell them how many baths they can take or how much water they can consume without being penalized? I'd like some clarification of what you're trying to set up here on controlling the water in the valley.
Thank you, Mr. Manis. Let me try a shot at that, and correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is SGMA does not apply to de minimis users. That means if you are a single well owner And de minimis user is defined as 2 acre-feet per year?
Yes.
So if you are you are a person, you own a lot, you have a well, you have a horse, you have a garden, you have a wife, and you have 3 kids, and you use less than 2 acre-feet of water a year, SGMA is not going to apply to you. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, the only caveat I would add is that the water use has to be used for residential. So if you start using it for ag, then you start getting into a different issue.
Okay, that was my definition that I've been running. There is a minimum amount that you have to exceed, and this is 2 acre-feet. And as long as you're a resident and you're not, you're not running an orchard or something or growing anything on it, you're okay. Less than 2 acre-feet per year.
The way SGMA stands now, that is correct. Whether SGMA changes down the road, I don't know.
Who changes this then?
State law.
Who's playing top controller on this? For who can change it down the road, and all of a sudden you'll find they got everything set up the way they wanted, and then they change it.
Sir, I don't know. It won't be this body. It will be somewhere in the state legislature.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Again, back to this document, again, Bill Manofsky, your answer was very definitive that it does not apply. This is the SGMA handbook. The SGMA handbook says a GSA cannot impose fees on de minimis pumpers under most circumstances. Now, when I asked the question, you said we're going to get back to you. When he asked the question, you said it does not apply very definitively. I don't think you're correct.
Thank you, sir. Do you have a question?
Carol Wilson, 1030 North Heritage Drive. I was just curious, Mick, if you were going to address that disparity.
The disparity, would the lawyer like to clarify anything on that? I thought we gave 2 clear answers myself. Maybe we didn't.
Yeah, the first question is to rates. Rates are different than groundwater extraction ability. They're completely different aspects. As to rates, the question was, will de minimis users be charged anything? And that's a very abstract question. Don't know. Could you have a charge on a de minimis user to monitor their wells to make sure that they are a de minimis user? Yes, under the law you could. Doesn't mean that this board will do that, but that is one area in which there could be a small charge to read a meter. But that's a rate question. That's not a question of, well, does de minimis users subject to restrictions?
Well, that seems to be confusing. That doesn't address the first gentleman's question or Mr. Manofsky, was it? His name. That is confusing. Mick, can you clarify it at all?
I'll just give you my best shot. That de minimis users are not impacted by SGMA law.
But according to the SGMA handbook, they could be.
Well, you could have to prove that you are a de minimis user. So if you prove you are a de minimis user, then you're not impacted by state law.
That's what I'm saying. Restrictions are one thing. Restrictions on amount of water use is one thing. Rates you pay are a different thing.
So let me put it this. Let me give you an example. The way I understand it, and maybe this will help. There may be a time in this valley and all through Southern California where that comes into question, whether or not we charge or how we manage our water extractions. And we need to know who is a de minimis user and who is not a de minimis user. Let's say you have an acre of land here and you are just a beautiful woman with a family and a house and that kind of stuff. Your next door neighbor owns a car wash. You both report you're de minimis users. However, one of you may and one of you may not be. So we have to go through the entire valley and find out who is de minimis users and make determinations. How we make those determinations, we haven't decided yet. I have no idea how we're going to make those determinations. But it may come to where we have to have an analysis on, we put a meter on a well to determine whether or not you are a de minimis user. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I don't believe that will happen, but that may happen. In that instance, the cost of that meter is going to be shared by either the state or the private property owner. I don't know the answer to that question either. But in that case, that person, you, would the burden is on you to prove that you are a de minimis user and not impacted by Sigma. Is that clearer?
I guess.
No, if it's, I'm trying to do my best I can.
I don't want to take any more of your
I think.
time.
Well, I think this is a really important question, and
I
I think
do
Mr.
too.
Manis has I think we gave him a fair answer, and that's what we are looking at today. Is the condition that if you are a de minimis user, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sigma does not apply to you.
And how would I prove that? By showing you my water bills?
We haven't got there yet. I believe there will be standard stock criteria that the state will move down to all the GSAs to help all the GSAs make standard decisions. Tim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, if you're paying a water bill, you're not going to be impacted. The water bill you're not an individual domestic well owner, right?
No.
So that goes.
No, but other people are.
Yeah, other people are. I'm just pointing that out. If you're paying
Thank
a water
you.
bill, you're getting water from the water
Thank
district.
you. Thank
Chairman
you.
Gleason, if I could give maybe an example.
Please.
If you were a de minimis, if you own a house and you're out there on your own private well, and we see the house, we see it's a 2,000 square foot house or whatever it is, and it's got a small yard, you can do math calculations to figure out that it's not very likely that you're using more than 2 acre foot per acre. But if you had a 2,000 square foot house and you had an acre of lush grass out there, then the math starts showing, when you do general calculations of what the water use is for the grass, could put you above that. At that point, that house, this board, and I'm not saying they are, I'm saying that the law would allow them to put a well to make sure that you're staying below 2. Does that kind of put it more in a less abstract? A meter. Sorry.
A meter.
A meter on the well, so that make sure that you are in fact using less than the 2.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Can I add one thing?
You can.
I don't mean to make it more confusing, but my last conversation with the gentleman who's Mr. Gutierrez, who is running this issue, understands the sensitivity involved with going out to a landowner and saying, we're going to put a meter on your well. That's just not a pleasant thought. We're trying to avoid it. We're not trying to get there, but it may be a reality that the state has to face. And his last words to me was that the state is developing technology that's going to be able to determine water use without putting a meter on a well. And he doesn't know whether or not the state will accept that technology or whether that's how well developed that technology is yet. I think it involves GIS satellite imagery. I don't know. He didn't share that with me, but we're trying to avoid to be as minimally intrusive as we possibly can with a horrible law that has to be enacted. So that's where we're at.
I might add further on that. One way that people measure wells today when you get into adjudications is electric use. They do math calculations based on electric use, what type of pump you have, et cetera. So there's a lot of ways in which we could determine you weren't using more than 2 acre foot before we went to a meter. But to ask the question of rates, and this does say they could maybe apply, that is one very outside, far into the bookends possibility.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to say I think what he's saying is that if your electrical rates are billed on your well only, not your house and things like that, is that correct?
Well, no, I mean, you could do some general calculations of what you think the house would be using.
Okay.
It's going to be one of those things where, oh yeah, they would be using a lot of electricity on the house for it to get to that stage. It's another layer of which, just like the grass, I mean, you could overwater a small section of grass, but we can reasonably presume and make reasonable presumptions based on electrical use, amount of grass, those sorts of things.
Thank you, sir.
Public, get in line, Chuck. Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to put in that the 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act does state in here that a GSA, it says a GSA cannot impose fees on de minimis pumpers under most circumstances. Someone who extracts for domestic purposes 2 acre-feet per year or less as an individual landowner or homeowner. And it says if you're extracting water through a domestic well and not supporting major agriculture or large acreage, you will likely be exempt from these fees. See, this leaves it open. This was Valerie Kincaid, an attorney with O'Loughlin in Paris. Now, this is open until it's like the parking spaces in most of the cities in California, that now you can't find parking spaces in the cities without paying for it. And that's what this comes down to, is are they going to be leaving it open so that sometime down, if they want more money, they can just start charging everyone? But that might sound facetious, and I don't mean it to be that way, but that's what I'm trying to find out with this. And this gives some idea, some portion of what it is, 2 acre-feet, which if you calculate how many baths you take or whatever, or with your bill and your size pump on your well, you can determine what what you're using. In my case, this wouldn't apply, as long as they don't try to say that anyone who has a private well.
Mr. Manis, I think, thank you for your comments. I think you raised a good point. I cannot guarantee what the state's going to do in the future. I cannot tell you their motivation for leaving it open like you and Mr. Minovsky have referred to. I don't know. I can't help you. All I can tell you is what we're trying to do here.
Hi, Chuck Griffin, 1644 East Laura. Mr. Hall, I just wanted to maybe try to clarify this a little bit, if so correct me if I am wrong. But under Sigma law, I think maybe some of the confusion is coming from the de minimis user. And the reason that it is left open in the law is because if the basin becomes regulated, then the de minimis user would be affected by pumping fees or any of the fees in 107.235, whether it be the A or the B, which is subject to Prop 218.1 for operations and maintenance, and the administration is not. So I think that's where maybe some of the confusion's coming from. And so that's what I wanted to get out there. So there is a chance, and that's I think all that the public wants to hear, that there is a chance if we go to regulation, then the de minimis user is subject to the results of Sigma.
Mr. Hall, do you have a answer for that question?
I think, and maybe we're talking on different sections. I think you're talking about the difference between 10730 and 10730.2.
Okay.
10730 is pre-GSP fees. Those are the fees that you're going to be able to use to develop your GSP in the next 4 years. 730.2 is post fees.
Correct.
Post fees do not specifically exempt de minimis users.
Correct.
But with that said, the post fees are also subject to 218, and it is again in the abstract, but I doubt seriously that it's going to change much between a de minimis user pre and post.
And I would agree with your statement there. I don't think it is either, and I don't think this GSA wants to impose fees on the de minimis user. I think there's just a lot of confusion, and a lot of people don't understand the law the way it's written. And so it does leave that option there. And so when they hear, hey, we're going to get these fees coming in, and the pre-fees can be charged to the de minimis if you guys decided right now that we're going to regulate and say you can't, we're going to restrict pumping or whatever we're going to do. If we regulate, then the de minimis could be, and the first fee could be passed on as soon as the 90-day or 100-day waiting period is up. Then you could start charging that head fee, however you were going to charge it, tax, heads, how much you pump, whatever your fee was going to be, you could start charging that fee in the next 90 to 100 days if we submit everything into the state to start funding this procedure as we move along. So it's not on each agency's back to fund it. It'll be funded through the users. And I think that's where the confusion's at. And that's what I hear sitting out there. They just want a simple answer, not a big confusing answer. Just it's possible that you could be charged by Sigma law. I mean, and to say that they won't be, I don't think that's right. To tell them that they won't be, because there is the potential that they could be.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Again, that's after the GSP is adopted, and 4 years from now, there's a potential I kind of think that the way this is written, that Mr. Minosky handed to us, quoting Valerie Kincaid, I don't know what she was saying. I can't speak to everything, but when she's saying most circumstances, I think she's kind of talking about the pre and post. And what I'm hearing now is pre GSP adoption, which is 4 years away. De minimis users are not going to be charged the regulatory fee to put together the GSP.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bill Manofsky, again, another ratepayer. That is a handbook. It's not a legal document. That's why I originally addressed the question to council to see if there was any case law behind this to further refine it down. Okay, what I'm concerned about is, again, there's three groups of parties. You have the ratepayers, you have the independent or the private well owners, and you got agriculture. And right now, based on what you're saying, the de minimis user is not going to be funding this GSA. And I think the burden right now is initially going to go on the ratepayers. And I don't know why, because when I look at the well sounding data from the water district that I obtained, wells 8, 9, and 13 are coming back up. Wells 17, 31 are going down inches a year. When we go to replace those pumps, all they got to do is drop them 25 feet, and we get another couple hundred years of water. So if you look at the water district alone by itself, based on the existing wells, I don't know why we're a part of this GSA. This is really an issue between the private well owners and agriculture out in Inyakern. And the ratepayers are going to be footing the bill to resolve that squabble. That's the way I see it. So I think everybody's concerned about parity in the fees that are going to be charged to them to pay for this extra layer of bureaucracy, because no layer of bureaucracy is free. And if you look at the agenda, look at one of the agenda items discussing hiring attorneys, probably $500 an hour. I'd like to know where that money's going to come from, and I hope it's not going to be on my water bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Columbia Nelson, 334 Kayakali. I need a little bit of clarification. I, like a lot of the folks who built several years ago out here, on my well, we have 4 different parcels that draw water off the one well. I know there are several in our neighborhood who are 2, 3 owners on one well. My question is, are you counting by well or by parcel or by acre? Because each of our parcels is 2.5 acres. And I thought I understood Mr. Hall to say 2 acre feet per acre. That's my question. Are we taking 2 acre feet drawn a year from 10 acre parcels, or what were you referring to, sir?
Mr. Hall.
If you give me just a second, I will give you the definition of de minimis user directly from Sigma.
Thank you.
It's section 10730.
Yep, I'm trying to flip through my phone here.
Hurry up and take your time.
Well, do you have it in front of you?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead and read it. You've got a bigger screen than mine.
Okay. A groundwater sustainability agency may impose fees, including but not limited to permit fees and fees on groundwater extraction or other regulated activity to fund the costs of a groundwater sustainability program, including but not limited to, this is not a short section, by the way, not limited to preparation, adoption, and amendment of a groundwater sustainability plan, investigations, inspections, compliance, assistance, enforcement, and program administration, including a prudent reserve fund A groundwater sustainability agency shall not impose a fee pursuant to this subdivision on a de minimis extractor unless the agency has regulated the users pursuant to this part.
Yeah, that isn't. I was looking for the definition of de minimis, and I'll give you what the definition of de minimis is directly from the law. And frankly, it could be a better definition, but this is what we're dealing with. De minimis extractor is a person who extracts for domestic purposes 2 acre-foot or less per year. You're on a shared well. Shared wells are, I believe, less than 5, might be 4 or less, I believe is the exact numbers.
4 or 5 what? Owners or
houses
acres?
per well.
4, okay.
So it's not as much per acre as it is per person. So if you had 5 acres and you had 1 well, it's still, you can only use 2 acre feet. I think the way the law will develop over time is you would have off your well 4 times 2, 8 acre foot that could come out of that well metered, provided that one person wasn't using significantly more. Because otherwise you would have to put a meter off every output line to that well. And it starts getting operationally just not possible.
So you'll be monitoring our extraction, not the electric or any of the utilities.
Okay. I'm not saying that they're going to monitor your extraction. I'm saying this is bookends what you could do. One end is they see your house, they see the size of the house, the amount of people living there, the grass outside, and they do the obvious, this house should not be using more than 2 acre foot. The other end of that is, well, wait, you've got a very large yard, it's a large house, there's a lot of people there, it could be using more than 2, so they might then want to check and see if you are in fact a de minimis user. To check to see if you're a de minimis user, there's really 2 ways of doing it, besides the obvious paper look. That is electrical records and actual meter.
Thank you. And also, 4 years, we could still be meeting about this in 4 years. That to say we aren't going to probably see meters before 4 years, that's just a heartbeat for us.
Well, I'm just saying that's when we have to have the GSP adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just real quick, Tom Wicknick. So many elected bodies use public comment to sit there and offer nothing in return when people make comment. I want to commend you for having an open discussion during public comment and answering the people's questions. That is so important, especially with a new body like this. And I appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to actually answer questions from the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wickner. We're going to take that a step forward beyond what you're talking about. And one of the things we're talking about today is committee structure. And we're going to, one of those committee structures, in my mind anyway, is this outreach committee that we need to get our public relations moving and aggressively informing people, and that'll be developed as we move forward. So hopefully that will help the citizens answer more questions in a more effective way. Wes?
Yeah, Wes Katzenstein, 1450 Sidnor. I'm a de minimis user. And one of the, I think there's, I don't want to call it a poison pill, but I think there's an inherent problem built into Sigma. And it says on one hand that all current water rights will remain, and on the other hand, Sigma is supposed to manage the water. The GSA is supposed to control the groundwater, or supposed to make it sustainable. So current rights would say a person in agriculture could pump as much water as they can beneficially use, end of statement. But it's my understanding that the power that the GSA will have to control that is the fees that might be assessed. So, for example, if we are as overdrafted as all the studies say, we may well have to import water. So I would expect that every person in the valley, every user, could potentially be assessed a fee per gallon of usage to help import that water. And I would think the fees that you might assess on agriculture would be the one power you have to control that pumping. Okay, the law says you can pump as much as you can beneficially use, but by the way, you need to pay this much per gallon to help us replace that water. So I guess my question is that a proper understanding of the GSA's powers to regulate pumping? And that would be charging of fees. And if that's the case, as a de minimis user, I would fully expect that I would also be subject to those fees, particularly if the valley is, if we really all have to make a lot of sacrifices to remain sustainable. So I'm not sure I made a clear statement. First of all, a question, is my understanding correct that the powers the GSA has is to assess fees per gallon to control pumping? And my observation on top of that is then, as a de minimis user, I should someday not be surprised if I have to pay my share of those fees.
Okay, let me give it a try and correct me if any other board member wants to jump in here. I'd love to hear from you. Just saying. These guys are wearing me thin. Really good question. And I don't have definitive answers for you. And the reason I don't have definitive answers for you is not a fault of this board. The reason I don't have definitive answers for you is because the way the law was written was deliberately vague enough so that each basin that it applies to, which is over, I don't know how many basins, 500 in California, how many are Sigma related?
The numbers,
Tim?
yeah,
127.
127. Each of those basins is different. So how we manage, how the state forces these GSAs to manage their basin is deliberately vague enough so that each GSA can maneuver enough, hopefully, to satisfy the constituents that live and work in those basins. So I think you're right. There's no guarantees for what the future brings. I don't know. We'll find out as they create law and impose it on us. I do believe that you're absolutely correct that existing water rights, as per exist today, cannot be influenced by these new laws. I think that may be tested somewhere in the state of California. I don't know, but that's a correct statement. Whether or not the law evolves depends upon, and how it applies to us, I'm hoping, will depend upon how successful we are in achieving our objectives. If we are successful in achieving our objectives, then I think the less impact it will be for all of us. And I don't know that I gave you a full answer. Did I give you a full answer? Is there anybody else who would like to contribute something to that?
I'd like to contribute one thing. The way you've described water law at the beginning is not a right. What you're describing is you just go drop a well in the ground and pump as much as you want. That's the race to the pump house. That's what happens because we don't have adjudications throughout the state of California. What your water right really is, and this gets very complicated and far too long for here. It'd take days for me to educate everybody on this, so I'm just going to use the overlying right itself. Overlying right is everybody who has property in a basin has access to the water underneath that basin. And the race to the pump house situation, which is what we have in California without adjudications, you get to drop a well on your property, use as much water as you can, as fast as you can, and for any beneficial use, because when it becomes adjudicated, you're going to theoretically get more water. Your actual water right is correlative, and everybody who overlies that basin has an equal share with the next person. And the way that changes is, have you used water already? If you've used water already and your neighbor hasn't, you can get more water than your pure equal share. So it's not a water right to go out and pump as fast as you can right now. It's what us water attorneys would advise you in a not adjudicated basin before Sigma to do. That's just, I mean, I hate to say that because it's a shared resource, but that is sort of, it's a race to the pump house situation that Sigma is now stopping. That is what we're here today. Race to the pump house is over.
Could I add just one thing,
yes, please,
Mr. Chair? And Wes made a good point. That is true. The law is a bit of a quandary, and it's going to be that's part of the challenge that we face. And I just want to remind everybody of that this is a new government entity that we've created. We're working with a new law. It's going to evolve. We don't have all the answers. We won't have the answers for fees, for example, until after we start doing a rate study and really look at that. And I think that's, I would just ask for your patience and hope that you'll be patient to get those answers. We'll have them out to you as soon as we have them ourselves, right?
Yes, sir.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah, and I didn't expect answers today, but one of the courses the Navy sent me 2 years ago, taught me that there is power in a question, and if we can get some well-phrased questions on the table,
that's right.
Hopefully it's beneficial to you guys.
Thank you, sir. It's one of the reasons we're here is structured the way we are is to answer questions. Mr. Manis.
Yeah.
Another bite.
Yes, this is a little different, but it's back. It has a little bit of history on it on the valley. If anyone remembering what has happened in the past, and I think some of the studies that have shown up, and if Dr. Decker is here, I think he may remember a little more about it than I do, about the studies that were done on who is actually consuming the maximum of the water in the valley. And as I recall from these studies, and I think IWV Water District may have been in on the studies, that all of the independent well owners' consumption of water in the valley did not even, they were almost minuscule in their consumption compared to what the agriculture was and is consuming. In other words, the private well owners were not even, and yet their water table, including mine, has gone down a foot a year for the past 30-some years. Okay? So I'm losing the same amount of water as everyone else per year, so to speak. But the real consumers of the water in here are the agriculture. And that goes back to whether they're pistachio orchards now or the alfalfa of the past. In fact, Ridgecrest, if anyone remembers, there used to be a couple horse ranches down where the new Walmart's going in here. And because of and also the alfalfa was grown in the southeast part of the valley. And what happened was the arsenic that's in the ground, and it's coming from the southeast, the southeast, and moving to the northwest at about a foot a year is what it used to be. And it got to where that the horses, the animals, couldn't graze out there because of the arsenic level in the ground. And it's still moving, as I understand. And this is something that the overpumping has done, and it's been a major portion, or it's been a major fault because of the over agriculture that's being done here. This is not an agriculture area, and if you want to add cost on someone and also a good chance of slowing up the water consumption in the valley, get on the agriculture, because they're using up the majority of the water. And if you cut off the agriculture for 1 year probably, you'd notice a difference on how high everyone else's water comes up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it was not only Dr. Decker who worked on that. Every single agency, every single water user, everybody reported their usage. It was compiled by the Indian Wells Valley Water District and then added to by the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Management Group. And so I don't want to take any credit away from anybody, but it was a joint effort by all of us to report the water usage.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just didn't know who all was in.
I didn't want to see.
Thank you for filling that in.
Thank you. I'm trying to find that list.
I think public presentations is over. Thank you very much. Appreciate your inputs. I'm sure there'll be more of those. Look forward to an outreach program that's going to try to get as much information out to the public as quickly as possible, and won't be via this particular structure. It'll be more regular. It'll develop, and you'll see it. Okay, the next section of our meeting is special presentations, and we have two of them from Mr. Cannell and Ms. Oviatt. And what I'm going to do with both of these is I'm going to ask the gentleman and the lady to make the presentation, and then I'm going to open it up for public hearing. I know we don't normally do that, but please understand these are the preliminary looks at what we're talking about here, and I think it's advantageous to get the public comment. So, Mr. Cannell, would you kick us off, please?
Chairman Gleason, members of the board, My name is Jack Connell. I'm the Executive Director of the China Lake Alliance. And some of you are familiar with the China Lake Alliance. For those who are not, we're a community-based organization, part of the IWV, Economic Development Corporation. We've been around in this business for 23 years in terms of our support for China Lake, which is our mission, support the Navy at China Lake. And we think that that's very important to the community because the Navy generates 80% of the outside economic impact on the Indian Wells Valley. That's not everything that gets turned over inside the valley, but that's where the outside resources and economic drive comes. I wanted to speak to you today after having attended your meeting last month, and particularly concerning the timeline for applying for GSA status and for the timeline for the GSP. Last month it was discussed that this month you'd talk about what the timeline was for applying as a GSA. And then Chairman Gleason gave a pretty detailed rundown on what Sigma said concerning the GSP. The principal thing in there that I took out was that this board has until January of 2020 in order to have a validated GSP in place. And no slide. Okay. Didn't bring. Oh, okay. Lorelei, I'm sure has. Oh, okay. She's a more polished presenter than I am. I don't come with anything other than my good looks. In any event, that brings me around to one of the timelines that we are looking at in addition to this GSA, GSP structure. And that has to be something that's kind of a dark word around here. It's called BRAC, Base Realignment and Closure Commission. The first thing I want to say is my remarks, I'm no way forecasting, predicting, or anything else about a BRAC. I'm just going to talk about what the facts are surrounding BRAC. There have been BRACs since 1991, 93, 95, and 05. The China Lake came out of BRAC 95 in great shape. They got a modest gain in terms of workload and jobs. In BRAC 05, they came out way ahead in terms of additional approximately 800 jobs and $300 million worth of military construction dollars that flowed into the base. Now, why was that? Well, the reason was that China Lake, in the last two rounds of BRAC, 1995 and 2005, was evaluated by the Navy and Department of Defense as number one in military value amongst all of the technical installations the Navy had. Now, going forward, I think that we could be confident in looking at what's happened over the last 10 years and the progress that China Lake has made and the needs of the Navy, that were we to have another BRAC in the near future, that China Lake would probably come out rated number one again, were it not for one thing, as water. So that's the reason I have so much interest in the doings of this organization and your timeline. I'll say again, BRAC is not scheduled. However, the President has requested a BRAC in the last three presidential budgets. And more important than that is we're going to have a new president in the White House in January, and we're going to have a new Congress. So it's rather hard to predict about whether or not there might be a BRAC coming on the horizon or not. Were we to have another one, the earliest window that could feasibly be would be 2019. And that would be legislated in the FY18 NDAA. National Defense Authorization Act. And I want to give you a little bit of what that timeline looks like should that happen. Should that come out in the NDAA, and that would come out, that would be through Congress, signed by the President, about a year from now, very roughly. Then the Department of Defense would go through a series of data calls and analysis and making their recommendations to the BRAC Commission. That would occur during calendar 2018. And then the BRAC Commission would begin meeting probably very late 18 or early 19 They would do their analysis, they'd review it, they'd make on-site visits, they'd hold public hearings, have their meetings, and if the BRAC events from the past carry over, they'd be making their decisions and voting along about late summer of 2019, about September timeframe. Forward their recommendations through Congress to the President, and it'd be signed in 19. Now, what would happen at that time, given the Sigma requirement for a GSP by January of 2020 is that China Lake and New Wills Valley would be sitting out there in a situation of still having this water problem and not having something to point to that shows towards a solution. And what I'm is urging you to do is to look at your schedule and your resources and the feasibility of it, and ideally have a GSP in place and perhaps some modest amount of progress shown against that by the summer of 2018. I believe if that were in place in mid-2018, that China Lake would not be severely adversely affected by that, because there will be other installations around that have the same similar types of problems. It's one thing to have a problem and not have a solution on the table that's been validated. I'd much rather see us go to a BRAC were it to occur by having that problem on the table, which it already is, but having a validated solution in the form of a GSP. Lastly, I'll say this. I want to commend you for your actions and your service in this situation. I know every one of you up there either serves on a county board, mayor of a city, or serves on a district board. That's a time-consuming thing, especially when some of you have jobs and businesses to run. And to take this on is an additional workload. And I commend all of you for your actions in doing that. And I'll answer any questions you have when you go to public.
Before we go to the public, any questions from the board? Mr. Cannell? I have one comment, Mr. Cannell, is I had a conversation with Navy leadership within the past week, and he's corroborated what you said. He said, you guys just need to get a plan. We need a plan. And I think that would be a significant event, and the Navy would take that, would be thankful to get that. So thank you for your comments. All right, Ms. Cannell, if you just grab a seat, you may be asked a question. I'm going to keep public comments to 10 minutes if I can.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Just so for your information and for everyone else's information, Admiral Corey is going to be addressing the City Council on the 21st, and he is going to talk about, hopefully, some of that information that he both presented to the county and to us. And so I encourage, if you have those questions, to be able to ask them at that time. We're waiting for confirmation from Captain Wiley, and I expect that's going to come too at that same time. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. What I'd like to do is open the public comments. I'd like to keep it for 10 minutes because we've got a bunch of stuff to cover today. So let's stop the clock at 5:54 and let's keep going for 10 minutes. Mr. Manofsky, state your name first, please. For the record.
Bill Manofsky, 2700 Matarango. I'm a retired Navy commander. I'm also the National Vice President of Legislative Affairs for the Association of the United States Navy. One of our legislative agenda items is energy and natural resource use by the global fleet. Does that truncate down to China Lake? No, it doesn't right now. But in my discussions with Senator Feinstein's staff and Congressman McCarthy's staff about BRAC, they were almost upset that I brought it up. There's been no discussion about any BRAC now or in the future with the Committee on BRAC on the House Armed Services Committee. What I want to do now is to provide rebuttal to all the comments made by the China Lake Alliance. I'm going to ask my management back in Arlington to allow me to investigate this further so I can provide counter information to all the BRAC hearsay that we have floating around.
That would be wonderful. That would be great. Thank you very much, Mr. Officer. We'll be eager to hear that.
Stan Rotora, 1239 East Bella Vista. Whether there's going to be a BRAC coming, which I have no clue about, or there isn't, My feeling is that 2020 is just too late to have a plan. We need to do something before then. Last meeting, I suggested that recycling water would be something that we could do. We could do it soon. We could do more than a plan. We could actually do a project. We could actually show some progress toward solving. Obviously, it's not going to solve all the problem, but it is a start, and it would show people that we were actually interested in actually solving the problem. So I would like to one time, again, repeat, even though I do concur with Mr. Canal, we need to do something. We need to do it much sooner than 2020. And I think the fact that we have a timeline, that's a state's timeline, the 2020 is a state timeline. It doesn't have to be our timeline. We could have a much more aggressive timeline if we would actually go out and start doing something. So I would appreciate it if you would seriously consider recycling water. And there is a new wastewater treatment plant already on the books. The plan to do that has been on the books since 2010, I believe. We're 6 years behind in getting our wastewater treatment plant going. The state of California is supposed to come out tomorrow with new guidelines or a draft report on how to use recycled water in the state to solve part of the state's problem. So that's an area where we can do more than plan. We can actually do something. I would encourage you to get behind that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And to just a comment on what you just said, this coming Monday, coming along, but I'm sure we're going out to Fort Irwin to check out the water treatment facility, a bunch of us here on this board.
That's correct.
We're looking forward to going to Fort Irwin, I think, Monday next to go learn more information about what you were just talking about. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to also add that there is about 2,000 acre-feet in the percolation ponds. I have asked, and we are looking at it in the city with our 30% design, so that that water is not simply percolated away or evaporated, but put for use, and that is part of the studies we're going through right now. Thank you.
Outstanding.
Again, Bill Manofsky. I participated in the BRAC response for 2005. I distinctly recall the summer of 2001, before I went off to the Iraq War. I was working on the BRAC questionnaire and the responses for Code 47. So to alleviate any concern about whether there's going to be a BRAC or not, and this is what I confirmed with Congressman McCarthy's office, they're going to put a document out about 3 years in advance requesting input. It's just not that in 2019 there's going to be a BRAC. They request input from all the different facilities well before a BRAC happens. And so look as a leading indicator for that BRAC response to come out in the first place. None has been generated. It's about a 3-year process, and it hasn't happened. I have a question for the Commander. Are there any large-scale industrial uses of water on the base, such as, making water-soluble rocket propellant or anything that are applicable to the current conflict in the Middle East?
Excuse me. Those questions for me.
Okay. Well, you were saying that any board member
just a matter
could
of protocol,
participate.
sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, cool. Can you please
Commander
ask him
Longbottom, would you
the
like to
question?
respond to that?
I can't comment on that. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
The assumption is that essentially the major water use on base is swamp coolers, flushing toilets, and keeping the 2 swimming pools full of water. Is that a correct statement?
Go ahead.
I'm not aware of 2 swimming pools at the time.
There's a swimming pool inside the gym, and then there's a swimming pool behind the officers' club.
Yeah, the swimming pool in the gym is empty at this time.
Okay, they've emptied it. Okay, hadn't been there in a while.
I will tell you, and I don't know the specifics, but I would put our reduction numbers up on the table, and that we've reduced 53.7% of the Navy's water usage since 2007.
Because at a meeting of the China Lake Alliance, there's a luncheon where the Admiral came in and Captain Wiley mentioned that the Navy uses less than 5% of the water in the valley, and you expect to reduce that even more. So my concern is when discussions are being made back to the Navy Yard and to Congress, is this spoken about in general terms as the critical mission need for China Lake, or do you go into the details of we need to be able to operate our swamp coolers?
What we need to do is collect these questions. I'm not sure you're capable of answering that question. The commanding officer would be the person. What I think we could do here is take your questions, take them on board, give them to Commander Longbottom. He can flesh them out, find what the authorities, and find out exactly what the right answers are, and then report back.
Well, then the last question is very important because this has been brought up to my congressional contacts. The ability to access the 6-inch pipeline between the base and the LA Aqueduct and the need for national security. What is the access to that? Mike Stoner told me that there needs to be some repair to the upper and lower connections, but that does exist. And does that ever come up in any of the discussions with the Navy Yard or Congress regarding the needs for national security and the water use at China Lake?
Sir, if you could write that question out.
I'll do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wanofsky. Okay, we're 8 minutes in. I don't see any more. Thank you very much. We'll close the public hearing and move on to item 2. The second special presentation, Ms. Oviatt.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Lorelei Oviatt. I am the Kern County Director of Planning and Natural Resources. I'm here to brief you on a project that is actually in both this basin and the Central Valley Basin, where we also have a variety of critically overdrafted basin, Tulare Basin, that's associated with our county-wide general plan update. So starting with the big picture, I have been working over the past year on the question of how do we identify land uses that could potentially allow property owners to recoup a financial gain and still reduce water use. So this is an ongoing conversation. It started actually with the San Joaquin Least Conflicted Lands Project, which was done in the Valley by the state of California, brought together stakeholders through the governor's office. One of the things that we have the most experience with is commercial scale solar. We have done enough to know what are the best practices and to know its water use. Therefore, I've been embarking on a conversation about commercial scale solar as a solution to rebalance water uses and allow property owners to therefore have a use for their property that they could financially profit from, but at the same time reduce water. The situation here in the Indian Wells Valley is different than the Central Valley. The components that you need for such a program are, one, you have to have transmission. We cannot attract private investment, and the reason that we have terrific solar radiation and no commercial scale solar here is that we have a bottleneck in the LADWP and Southern California Edison transmission to this area because of population. For the last 30 years, transmission planning has been done based on population. If you have a big population center, they've increased the transmission. Because of the Inyo County and smaller San Bernardino County, very small population, and Indian Wells Valley, Southern California Edison has looked at this area and said, we have enough transmission. Starting in 2005 with the Tehachapi TRTP, Tehachapi Renewable Transmission Line, which was the first experiment, the California Public Utilities Commission, CalISO, and Sacramento decided, let's actually plan a transmission capacity project into the Tehachapis for renewable energy. That was its purpose. It's 4,600 megawatts. It was a huge success. It took 12 years to plan, and they're going to learn to plan faster than 12 years now based on our feedback on that project. But that project's been a huge success, and beyond 4,600 megawatts, they actually have gotten about 6,000 megawatts. That has therefore created the opportunities for wind, solar, that goes down to Southern California, it goes all over California, and that was through the READY process. So our first issue is transmission. And then we look at permitting, we look at how do we attract private investment. And so the first piece of this is that we have been participating as an invited county, along with Inyo County, San Bernardino County, and others, to the Ready 2.0 process. I provided to your board, and for those in the audience, there's a few copies out on the table of the Board of Supervisors' request to the Ready process, along with a attached letter that kind of explains, the Ready process and how it operates, that we be included in their Tehachapi focus area. The Tehachapi focus area had already been determined for about 5,000 megawatts, including upgrades to Tehachapi and Kern County and that area, and some into Kramer Junction, which is San Bernardino, as well as Inyo County's ongoing conversation about how much and what kind of renewable energy and where should it be. They have been enthusiastic response from both the CPUC, the CEC, and the utilities in looking at this area for an upgrade to transmission. I want to be clear that an upgrade in transmission does not always mean new lines. In fact, in this area, it probably won't mean new lines. It could just mean upgrades to the substation. In addition, LADWP already has a significant upgrade to their lines through the Barron Ridge station. Barron Ridge is why, as you drive through Cantil now, what you see is LADWP solar projects. I want to be clear that those projects were done by Kern County. We recouped the sales tax. We recouped, the construction advantages, along with others, and we control all the conditions on those, not LADWP. So they are our partners. The significant advances that LADWP has made, 90% of it was made in Kern County. They look at us as a partner, and they are very clear that the conditions and the restrictions that the Board of Supervisors puts on those are to their advantage. So, in these conversations, we need to expand transmission. We are actively involved in that as the Kern County Board of Supervisors. I am briefing you to also invite the other supervisors, as well as the City of Ridgecrest as individuals, to look at perhaps signing on for support of the READY program. They will be issuing a report in probably 6 months. Once we identify a transmission upgrade, we now have interest from solar developers. The county is in their general plan update. This is a county-wide general plan update that we're looking at a variety of elements, including water elements, healthy communities, and the energy element. We will be looking at designing a solar overlay zone. This is a zone that would go over selected areas. It's optional for the property owner to use, but it would streamline solar commercial scale development. Right now, they need a CUP and an individual environmental impact report. That costs money. We need to attract private investment into the valley to use this transmission by providing them a streamlined approach. The county would create a zoning amendment. We would work through a public process to identify, and the number one reason to do this is water reduction. Therefore, we're looking at properties that use water intensively, and we're providing this as an option so that those property owners could enter into conversations with solar developers that could monetize their land in a different way. So for the purposes of just discussion, so that everyone understands, an operating commercial scale solar project are not mirrors any longer. They don't have to be washed all the time. That is very, very old technology. And an example is 140 acres of commercial scale solar uses about 1 acre foot a year, if that. Just to give you the dimensions here. We would be, so what the county is doing is the county is going to be doing an EIR update through the general plan for a zoning overlay. The county is not buying land. The county is not doing solar. We are, however, using our private-public partnerships. We have permitted every major international and domestic commercial solar developer in Kern County. They come to us and say, what's next? We are also in communication with LADWP. The LADWP board 3 weeks ago asked their management to determine what would it take for us to provide the City of Los Angeles 100% renewable energy. That's going to take Kern County projects. So part of what I'm here to offer to you is that we believe in the county and in my planning world that this could be one of the important tools in a GSP. And we are looking at bringing this forward and getting this zoning in place, having the transmission ready to go. It'll probably take 2 or 3 years for it at this point. We've challenged the CPUC, Chairman Michael Picker and others are now under a challenge that they've accepted to get transmission built in 4 years, not 40 years. And at the rate we are going, we will have this in place by September 2018, maybe October. And so we would like to continue to brief you on this. We will be having a full public process with the community, with property owners. This goes through the same sort of process, public workshops. It goes to the Planning Commission. It goes through an EIR. So there is a process whereby everyone will be involved in looking at this. And I would also offer that I would like to make sure that it is part of the discussions at the GSP Development Committee, and that this could be one of the biggest tools. On top of this, one more element that will attract is a conservation element, and we are working on conservation money that could also monetize property owners, meaning they could sell their land for conservation if for some reason they didn't have water or they had other plans for it. And with that built-in conservation mitigation makes it attractive to do these commercial scale projects. That's my brief today. We're very encouraged. The response in Sacramento has been overwhelmingly positive because they see this as a new way that renewable energy can be used as a solution to some of our water rebalancing issues. And I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Oviatt. Appreciate it. If you grab a seat, I'm sure we're going to have some.
Okay.
Before I go for a 10-minute public presentation, I want to ask the board if they have comments, thoughts, or considerations that they'd like to offer this time. I know I've got a couple. So I'll start us off, and maybe if you guys would need to jump in, great. This is just the beginning of this theory, this thinking of this possibility, this chance that may develop or it may not. We've had several meetings with Sacramento folks, with the California Energy Commission, with LADWP, with BLM, with the Navy, fully engaged. And we're looking at, is this possible? Is this something that we can do to help us bring two issues into clarity, into focus? One of those is reliable energy for this community and for the base. The other is helping us solve our water problem. So we're at the beginning. This is a feasibility study that we're talking about. There's going to be more to come as we move along down this road. We don't have a lot of answers. We just have a lot of people that are eager to see if this is a possible solution, and we're working very closely with the Navy to identify exactly how this fits in with the Navy mission and how we can work with the Navy to create something that's compatible with what they're trying to do. You talked a little bit about the water expense for solar fields and solar overlays. Could you just give me another minute or two on describing what a solar overlay is, and talk to me about, the possibility of having some relationship, if this were to ever happen, that the solar company would have to bring in their own water? Could you talk about that for a second?
Absolutely. So the way we do wind, for example, is not conditional use permits. All the wind you see up there is an actual overlay in the zoning ordinance that they have to put over the existing zoning they have. So they do it once. It has a whole list of conditions in it. The certainty for them is once they have that overlay, they can, do what they need to do, and they don't have to go through more public hearings. And then the public has certainty, then we and the board has certainty that there are rules. We don't do that for solar. We do individual conditional use permits. So we want to create an overlay that would go over A or over E, which are residential and agricultural uses in particular selected areas, which will work out through this process, that would allow the solar company to come in and not have to do an EIR, not have to figure out their conservation. Those are cost savings for them. And so that's what would attract them here to this valley. That would make it worth coming. The second issue is that we have the capacity, and based on the EIR that we've already done for this valley, it's very clear that the solar companies will have to change some of their practices for dust control. They will have to bring water in from outside of the valley for dust control. And certainly a fee could be assessed on them for their water use. For that 1 acre foot, if it turns out to be 40 acre feet, they would have to pay for that. That is all part of their numbers. But as a reminder, at the end of the day, a utility has to buy this. So LADWP, Southern California Edison, are the people who would have to buy it. However, there is another entire group of buyers of Kern County electrons called SCAPA, which is the Southern California Power Authority. It is comprised of 18 cities, Riverside, LA, Colton, Pasadena. All of those cities now buy power, little pieces of power from projects here. SCAPA is very interested in this project, and it would just be a question of them moving the electrons through LADWP's lines or through Southern California Edison lines. So those are the pieces.
Thanks. Now, my understanding is the primary objective of this effort is water reduction.
That's correct.
And a secondary effect would be a positive impact on reliable energy for the Navy and for our community.
That's correct. And then the third impact is the construction jobs and the sales tax. But the number one reason that we would be identifying this area, and it would be a limited number of megawatts, a limited number of acreage, and selected locations, is to reduce water use. Before I go on to my other thing.
Well, you just struck a really interesting point is,
okay.
We're talking, do we know yet what the bandwidth available is on the transmission lines, existing transmission lines? And how does that correlate to acres? Or is there a correlation yet?
We're still working that through the READY process, which is that point. A last piece which I forgot to offer to you is that people in Sacramento are offering me grant money to do a plan, and I've asked them if it could be applied to a GSP plan, and they said yes. So they are actively finding foundation money who are interested in this relationship between land use and water. It may not be used for hydrology, but they are very interested in this, and I believe that it could be used and be useful for you in preparing a GSP.
I want to build a little context. This is not just this valley. This is also an opportunity for the Central Valley you
That's correct.
about. And so talk a little bit about that. I mean, what's the relationship?
The Central Valley situation is slightly different. What we have there is lands that may have some water, but they really don't have enough water to do anything profitable with them because the water's bad. We have west side properties where they've been struggling to farm anyway. And in this case, there would be an incentive to those people to give up whatever water they have. So just give up that water, let it be used by other people because your land's going to be monetized a different way. So that's another piece of the puzzle. It also, however, does look at reductions in water use for lands in the valley portion who had lands that were using a lot of water and now want to market that water or somehow move that water. Those are, so the zoning overlay could potentially be applied differently in the Indian Wells Valley than it's applied in the valley.
So here's something I'd like an answer for. If this concept moves forward, and if it moves in a direction that would be beneficial to this community, and as it goes in that direction, and it's still targeting water reduction, and there's a momentum that's built into this business line of bringing solar in here, who is controlling the tempo of that movement? And keeping the focus on water reduction. I don't want this to go off water reduction theme. I want it to be focused on water reduction, and I want to have some control or how we're going to manage that to keep it focused on water reduction and not just consuming other acres.
The Kern County Board of Supervisors.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I have 3 questions, if I may.
Please.
The scale of the land involved. What kind of what amounts are you looking at for these overlays?
We are talking about thousands of acres, but I don't have a number yet.
Okay. Is there both public and private lands? Could they be used in that project?
Councilwoman Breeden, through the chair, the DRECP, which has just been adopted through the Bureau of Land Management, will be a very useful tool for us, actually, in this conversation because of conservation types of things that it might provide. However, this is not specifically a focus area in the DRECP for renewable energy, and so we are more looking at the public lands for conservation partnerships rather than renewable energy. The Kern County Board of Supervisors' position is that there is a lot of other uses for the public land. And putting one more on the public land drives out our OHV use, it drives out mining and other sorts of things. So our partnership with BLM is really in the conservation realm.
Okay, and my third question, does this affect our airspace at all?
No, it does not.
Good answer.
As you will see, specifically in the letter that the board sent, it very clearly stated that wind is prohibited in this area, and there would be no wind. So this is only commercial scale solar. Once again, they are not mirrors. They are not reflective in the same way they were years and years ago, and we have successfully worked out airspace issues. There are some conditions on frequency deconfliction, which is where they use telemetry to run the solar project, and we have conditions that require that they work out those frequencies with the military. There's a military office that actually works all that out for everyone in the airspace, and we have actually a condition.
Thank you, through the chair.
Thank you. Okay, let's open up for public comment, 10 minutes. I think it's an interesting topic, and I'm sure as we move forward in this course of action, if we do, then we'll have more questions. Go for it.
Bill Manofsky, 2700 Matarango. I'll put my happy face on.
Is that your happy face, Mr. Manofsky?
17 years in the Navy, you've got to understand I'm smiling. No, I applaud this. I went in, just as an example, I believe in Maxwell's approximations a lot. You're doing all these calculations, they always end up to an approximation anyway. But I went and bought a solar panel from the auto store for recharging car batteries. And with it came a little pamphlet. And it showed the solar insolence around the United States. And I was surprised to find I own a house in the hot spot in the United States. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, the Solar Millennium Project that never made it put some equipment in, and for a year they measured a solar insolence here in the valley higher than anywhere in the United States. Is that correct? Does anybody...
Are you asking me a question?
We are, yes. We are in the Saudi Arabia of solar. So what she's saying is great news. In fact, I took that solar cell in my garage and pointed it outside with the garage door opened, and it's a 12-volt cell. It read 20 volts indoors. Okay, so my question is, I'm on fixed income, and I went to look at the economics of installing solar on my house, and I can't do it because the tax incentives don't really apply to me. Is it possible to, just for this area, get specific tax incentives from the state and the federal government to encourage residential industrial solar? I'm surprised that this place is just not bristling with solar panels on every building like there are oil wells bristling all over Texas.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Manofsky. We don't have an answer for you, but we'll look into it, certainly as we move forward, how we can best take advantage of this opportunity in any way we possibly can. Wes, state your name, please. Thanks.
West Katzenstein, 1450 Sidnor. I think we have a potential corollary problem in the valley that if we assume that we don't really have enough water for agriculture, I think there's a potential for a huge dust and sand problem someday. And so as far as the solar goes, it would seem like it might make sense to try to design these systems so that if you put it on land that hasn't currently been cleared, that maybe the systems are up in the air enough that you don't have to clear out the native vegetation, and therefore you don't create a sand problem. And then there's another corollary observation that if this does go in over where we have current agriculture, then you may end up absorbing the problem of dust pollution unless you can perhaps do a design that will perhaps bring the foliage back underneath potentially some raised panels in such a way that it doesn't that it solves the dust problem that might be headed our way. So those are my observations.
Thank you, Wes. Those are good quality observations, and I'm sure an EII will satisfy most of those answers.
I would like to address that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. We don't need to raise the panels. You can drive all over and look at our thousands of acres. We have no dust problem. What we do is they revegetate underneath. In addition, instead of scarifying the earth now, what they do is they cut the vegetation down and roll it in. We do make them. You can drive to Canteel and every place else. It's only during construction that we have an issue, and we found ways to keep that from happening. We actually believe that this will stabilize lands that otherwise could turn into dunes, and we believe that's one of the advantages of commercial-scale solar on particular types of projects. But I invite you to go to Canteel. I invite you to go to any of these places and look at our solar projects. We have no dust coming off of them. If you do see dust, you can call me personally, because they are revegetated. And where they're not revegetated, they have a crust put over them so that they don't have emissions. I also wanted to address, because it was brought up, I don't want this group to leave with the solar millennium as the last thing they heard. That was a thermal solar project under the California Energy Commission. It uses enormous amounts of water. We are not doing that type. Solar thermal is not under the control of the Board of Supervisors, only the California Energy Commission anyway. And one of the reasons that it has gone out of popularity, there hasn't been a solar thermal project approved by the California Energy Commission for 6 years, is because of the economics of Chinese and solar panels that have dropped the price of PV to the point where solar thermal can't compete.
Thank you, Ms. Soviat. We got 4 more minutes. Sam.
Sophia Merck, Sam, a private citizen, 2062 South Mikes Trail Road. Lorelei, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank this board for letting Lorelei speak in regards to this. I'm very familiar with the READY project, but however, where can we get a copy of the presentation that Lorelei just put out? There wasn't any up there.
Yeah, we don't have a copy of
Okay.
that, but we can help you with some notes.
Okay. And is there a way, Bill Minosky brought up the point of distributive power, and I was hoping that Kern County could incorporate that into their new rules and regulations. Also, using recycled water for their solar projects would be a good idea too. And also, Eastern Kern APCD also put out a rule in regards to the air quality and stuff like that. And they encourage mowing. So thank you very much, Lorelei, and this board.
Thank you, Sam. Public hearing is closed. Anybody for the members got any comments? Do we need a vote on this bill for receive and file?
You do not.
Thank you very much. Moving on to with the agenda. Consent calendar. If the board would like to discuss any item listed, it may be removed from the consent calendar. Do we have anything on consent?
Agenda.
Just the minutes. Just the minutes. Anybody in the public like to pull anything off the consent agenda? The minutes? Seeing none, we'll close that, bring it back to the board for your actions and a vote.
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion to approve the consent calendar.
You have a motion?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Moves to item number 6, approval of regular meeting schedule for 2016 and 17. Mr. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alan Christensen from the staff. Last meeting on August 25th, you directed us to come back with a regular schedule going forward. We took that to mean the rest of 2016 and the entire calendar year of 2017. Scheduling all these folks who also have meetings that they attend and trying to make that all happen with 5 different agencies proved to be a challenge. But after much discussion, checking and rechecking, we recommend the regular meeting day be the 3rd Thursday of each month at 10 a.m. right here in Ridgecrest City Hall. You have a list of those dates in your packet. We are aware that and apologize that that is also that would conflict with the TAC meeting of the Cooperative Groundwater Group. We wish that weren't the case, but that was the one, really the one that we all agreed and could land on. We hope that we anticipate that groundwater group will be integrally involved in what we do here, and so hopefully that could be rescheduled. Anyway, the schedule's here for your consideration and approval, and if I can respond to any questions about the process if you'd like to.
Thanks, sir. Any questions from the board before we go to the public? Seeing none, I'll open a public hearing. Anybody in the public wishing to comment on item number 6, approval of regular meeting schedule? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for comment, consideration, and a vote.
There was some discussion. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I've heard numbered of people asked about having it in the evening so more of the public could attend. But I know what we went through to try to get this time, and I don't know how we can accommodate an evening schedule with everybody having all staff and board and everyone else, including this entity, because that is not available on those times at night. So we would have to start back to 0 on a time. I would like to see if it's possible for us to schedule this for a little while and see if we don't lose our public, because I want to make sure the public's involved. But I also understand the need for more. They want to be here at night, so I'm open either way. But if we could agree with this until maybe the first of the year, and then we look at it again and see if we're losing our public because they are unable to come during the daytime. Thank you.
Seeing no other comments, let me ask you a question, Vice Chair. Are you suggesting that we approve item number 6 contingent on a review at the first of the year?
Yes, sir.
Is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Moving on, item number 7. Discussion of rotation system for IWVGA Chair and Vice Chair. Mr. Christensen, I think this is yours too.
It is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, at the last meeting, your board directed us to come back with a rotation schedule. We have, in consultation with all the members, felt that the chairmanship and vice chairmanship would rotate amongst the 3 Kern County agencies, and all were agreeable to that. It's a simple schedule we propose right now through the rest of this year and through 17. Kern County would be the chair, with the city being the vice chair, and it would rotate from there. In 18, the city would be the chair, and the water district would be the vice chair, and then in 2019, an important year, the water district would be chair, and then the county would be vice chair, and so on. We have scheduled that in the staff report through 2020. If that is a sort of a typical rotation schedule for lots of organizations for a chair and vice chair. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that, but we think that will work.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Any board member got a question before I go to the public?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
What's our calendar year based on? Is it June, July, January?
Our fiscal, Mr. Brown, through the chair, our fiscal year for this groundwater authority is the calendar year.
Okay.
So we're not on fiscal year. So most of these agencies are on a July 1st, June 30th fiscal year, but we are not. We are on a calendar year. So that would follow the calendar year. So when we say 2016, we mean 2016 ending in December. Same with 17, 18, 19, and 20.
Any other questions? Okay, let's open the public hearing. Anybody in the public wishing to make comment on this rotation schedule? Public hearing is closed. Bring it back to the board for vote, comment, or a consideration.
Mr. Chair, I make the motion we adopt the new calendar. Microphone. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the motion that we adopt this schedule.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion.
Second.
Please, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody
Aye.
opposed? Okay, moving on. Plowing ground here. Number 8, discussion of request by Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District to serve as associate member of the IWVGA. Ms. Christensen, take us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this item was referred by your board for us to discuss at this meeting. I think in your packet you have some correspondence between the county and the East Kern County RCD. Their request is to be an associate member of this board. I could go through some of the rationale. If you'd like, I can do that. And also some of the legal points that we have made. Our recommendation is that the East Kern County RCD not be an associate member, but rather get right into the meat of this and be a member of the development committee developing the GSP. We feel that is really where the action is, and that they could best serve. They are a key player in the valley, in this area in the basin, and so we recommend that they be appointed to a membership on that committee. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them. We have, other than correspondence, we have not had any communications with the RCD, but hope to have that discussion now. So,
any questions from the board members before we go to the public? Okay, let's hear it from the public. Start us off, Don Joe.
I'm Don McCurnan, 1543 East Beaumont Road, Ridgecrest. I represent Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District. I give you each a letter asking you to consider us as being an associate member of the board. We've been in existence since 1953. We've been involved with the water and the dust problems in the valley, and we think that we have done a very good job of that. We can see no reason why we shouldn't be an associate member. We know that we can't be a regular member because we have no excuse me again. We have no executive powers where we can do things that you guys can do. And we recognize that you're having a tough time getting this thing all set up. We think that we serve better as an associate than we do as a committee member. So if you want to ask me some questions, shoot. You know, I'm just an dumb old guy that's out here asking questions.
I don't think so, Mr. McCurran, but if you can grab a seat, we may have questions for you. Stay close to that mic, please. Anyone else in the public wishing to make comment on item number 8?
Donna Thomas, 8158 Panorama Trail in Kern, also a board member on the East Kern RCD. I just wanted to clarify, on your staff recommendation report, you said that the letter from the State Water Resources Control Board did not indicate a legal review. However, when We contacted the State Water Board. Their request to us was to submit documentation regarding the formation of the district so that it could go to their legal review department. So I assume it was reviewed by their legal people. And my question also is on your report, is it to recommend us for the GSP Development Committee or the Advisory Committee? I thought the report said advisory.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. We're going to have answer those questions in a moment. Public hearing is still open. Mrs. Ferris, take your time. No hurry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, as a general philosophy, and maybe even common sense, it would seem important that we embrace rather than exclude people who can bring so much to the table. I don't know of any group that can bring more to the table for meaningful information, not only participation, but meaningful information than the Resources Conservation District. We've watched them for many years, and they have at their fingertips, for example, most every study that's ever been done on water, easily accessible, those kinds of things they can bring to the table. It would seem to me that that should be an important part of the initial work, rather than waiting and having so much in place that there may be very little to contribute. I mean, the big decisions are going to be made with the GSA. They've been willing to say, we're not asking for a vote, but their investment would be a great deal of a great asset, I would believe, to this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferris.
I just want to clarify something that Mrs. Ferris said. The reports that the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District have, since it is a public agency, they are available to the public at any time. They just have to come down and ask and sit there and read them. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a question. Are we going to hear both sides? Because East Kern County Resource Conservation District has their reasons why they think they would better serve as an associate member as opposed to GSP Advisory Committee member, and vice versa. The recommendation from the IWVGA says it would be they would be better serving on the advisory committee as opposed to being an associate member. If there could be some explanation on both sides, I'd like to hear both sides.
I don't know that we're designed to provide both sides. I think we're designed to propose an argument and then listen to both pros and cons and then make decisions on what we want to do with that decision. It's not a deliberative effort to present both sides. Am I wrong?
You're correct. I think maybe let's step back a little bit with the history of how the associate membership came to be, because what I'm hearing out there seems to be some misunderstanding of how we got where we are today. The associate membership in the JPA was a part of, and it came about solely at the request of the Navy. The original JPA concept had the Navy as a voting member, and BLM wasn't involved in the conversations at that stage yet, but we also included BLM as a voting member because this is going to affect them. From the day of the first JPA draft, which was a very basic document, kind of get everybody an idea what a JPA would look like, as it started moving forward, one of the first things we discovered was there are federal regulations and policies that do not allow BLM or the Navy to be a voting member of this JPA. So we had to figure out a way to deal with that. That's why we've got associate member status for them. And that was specifically carved out for them. So the associate membership status in the JPA isn't really designed for any local agency to also fit in. If we were going to head down that path, we would have to make special carve-outs and redo the JPA to bring them into an associate member status. So that's one aspect of it. The next aspect of it is, now we've heard people talk about two types of committees here, this advisory committee and a development committee. They're the same committee. I believe the development committee was kind of the way it was talked about originally, and it's always been an advisory committee, so maybe people are getting a little confused because we've started using advisory committee instead of development committee. It's the same committee. It's where all the action is really going to be. So if you're an associate member, like the Navy or Eastern Kern Resource Conservation District wanted to be an associate member, they're not going to get to vote on the dais up here. But in the committee, they're there, they're where the action first happens, and they're going to get a vote on that committee. So I think from our perspective, giving them a position and a named position on that committee is actually more beneficial, and it gives them more power than what they're asking for now.
Thank you,
Does
Mr.
that
Hall.
make sense?
Thank you.
Public hearing is still open. Public hearing is now closed. Bring it back to the board for votes, comments, and considerations.
Mr. Chair.
I'd like to speak. Mr. Christensen, go ahead.
Just a clarification on some of the comments, and I appreciate. I really didn't want to get into the back and forth of legalities of it, but we were just interpreting a letter from the Water Board. We did not. We can only interpret what's on the face of it, and the letter basically said this is non-binding. We didn't, whether it was a review by an attorney, it was non-binding. The other thing is that it was mentioned that the RCD is an asset. They absolutely are an asset. We've always felt that that's an important asset, and let me reiterate what Mr. Hall said. We think that that's best. The question to you, I think, is where are they best used? Where is the best used? And staff felt the best use was on the development committee, policy committee. It's the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen.
Jim?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask a question. The RCD asked if they could be an associate member of the JPA. We're getting recommendation that they would be best used and valuable to this organization on the advisory committee. I'd like to know whether or not the RCD would accept staff's recommendation if they would be willing to be an active participant on the advisory committee for the GSP.
Mr. McKernan, could you come up?
Yes, sir.
Or Ms. Summers, whoever's.
Yes, we would, but we think we could serve either way and give great value to this board.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McKernan said for the record that he answered yes, and he assured us that he would be of great value to this board in any place he went to, but would prefer to be an associate member, is what he said.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I got something to say.
Okay.
Did you have something to say?
I did.
Okay, go on.
No, you're Mr. Chair. Okay, all right. Sorry.
I think it's your guys' meeting.
Yeah, you guys can talk too. Honest to goodness, you really can. Okay. Did you have something to say,
No,
Peter?
go ahead.
Okay. I have been associated with both first originally as a newspaper reporter many, many, many years ago and reported on the RCD. I was amazed at the knowledge and the commitment that came from that board. That was when they were elected. And I was very, very pleased to watch the progress they made, the reports that they helped generate, the grants they sought. As part of their being able to live with the monies they received and to be elected, they couldn't continue to operate. They either were elected and did nothing, or they were appointed and continue to do great work. I am very proud of the work they do. I have very little to do with it anymore. I haven't attended their meetings, many years, but when you were meeting in the evenings and in your Kern, I went to them even when I wasn't anybody. And so I'm very proud of what they do. I think they offer a huge asset to this community, to this board, and to the entire valley, not just in Kern or their own specific area. I think they have a lot to offer, and I would like to see them participate on the advisory committee the advisory planning working development committee, because as you can see, our associate members are not saying an awful lot. I would appreciate it if you guys would say hi once in a while.
You should hear
the
them
commander
offline.
says the commander says we're here for eye candy.
Then you serve your purpose well. I'm being facetious, folks. I want to hear what they have to say too. But I know the work these people can do, this organization. I've seen, Donna and I have worked on it for many, many years, and I know what they can do. I want to see them be involved and be a part of the actual work rather than just sitting. I want to see them do that. So my recommendation is that.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Brown, did you have something to say?
No, sir.
Okay, my thought is that I've been consistent with them from the beginning and telling them what I thought. I agree with everything Mrs. Ferris said. We have an organization up here that we're trying to do something that has never been done in the Indian Wells Valley throughout the entire state. Our budget is, you've seen what it is, or you will see shortly what it is. It's ridiculous. And for us to say to a group with such talent, time, dedication, and knowledge, legacy knowledge of our valley and our water basin, whose function is to conserve our most precious resource, we need you. As a matter of fact, I would go so far to say that we may not succeed without you. And so there's no effort on my part, nor I believe anybody in this board, to exclude the Resource Conservation District. It is a matter of, my opinion, is a matter of legal consideration, design of the JPA, and function. I would like to see you get as deeply involved and entrenched with the processes of this organization as I possibly can, and I will do everything I can to make sure that you play as big a role as you can handle, because we need the help. Okay, those are my thoughts. I am president or chairman, so I'm not going to make a motion, no second it, but I'm waiting for any other thoughts from board members or a motion or a second.
I'll make the motion that we approve them to be on the advisory committee. I'll make a motion that we approve them to be on the advisory committee only.
Can I ask you, Mr. Brown, if you would consider to remove the word only?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It was kind of all-inclusive, yes.
Could you
amend that.
reshape that
Yes.
motion, please, for us?
I move that we, what do I want to say now?
Here. You don't want them on the, just say you don't want them on the.
Appoint the East Kern County Resource Conservation District as a member of the GSP Advisory Committee.
We have a motion.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? So moved. Moving to the number 9, approval of a GSP Advisory Committee structure. Mr. Christensen.
Yeah, I'll just do some introductory remarks, and then I'll let Tim Parker present this. We know that staff knows that this is an important element. The GSP is an important element of implementing SGMA. It's the how to fix whatever. It's identifying and how to fix the problem. So and identifying the scale of the problem, however big it is or however small it is. And so, as a group of staff members from all these different agencies, we know that we were doing our best to try to, I don't want to say make everyone happy, but we've heard from a lot of folks, and we were trying our best to do that. Tim is going to share with you is our best effort. It is one recommendation, but you're going to see a couple of other options today that if you're not pleased with the staff recommendation, you're more than welcome to modify it as which as board members you have the right to do virtually anything you want. So I just wanted to tell you that up front that if you choose to change the makeup, you are obviously welcome to do that. So with that, Tim, I'll turn it over to you.
One of the things that the chairman asked myself to do, and Dale for that matter, is to try to help bring information in from the rest of the state and what's going on. So I wanted to invite Dale to just take a minute or two and talk a little bit about committees she's working with in the state. Just a couple of minutes.
Well, I've worked with several IRWMPs or integrated regional water management plans. Also, the longest group that I facilitated is Hemet San Jacinto, and they did a groundwater management plan, and then in the end they actually have come up with a friendly adjudication. They filed a stipulated judgment. They worked basically in committees, and I was there for 14 years. You guys aren't going to take 14 years, but they did have an Indian tribe and a lawsuit, et cetera, that they had to deal with. In addition, the committee that we started out with was a policy advisory type committee. It contained, there are 4 agencies. There's 2 water districts, 2 cities, and they brought in a pumper. They brought in a pumper rep. And what they did is that they worked together. There were elected staff and attorneys on this committee, and in addition, pumpers. And they worked on policy. They put together the groundwater management plan, and then went on to do the stipulated judgment. And what they did, they worked with that. They had a technical advisory committee, which contained members basically of the same agencies, but the technical people of the same agencies. And they had a consultant, but the technical committee basically did the work. And the work was whatever the policy committee needed to know. The work was gathering the data or checking out, models, whatever the policy committee wanted. They would ask the technical committee, and the technical committee would work on this and then report back and consult experts if necessary. That model worked for the 4 agencies and the pumpers. And as I said, then they morphed into committees can change depending on what is necessary. So after they got their groundwater management plan done, they kind of morphed into one group, which I called CAM, which was consultants, attorneys, and managers, so that it was staff, basically, of the agencies with the attorneys and with consultants that were necessary. This ended up being the group that ended up putting the stipulated judgment together. So what I'm just trying to say here is that committees are extremely important, and they can really do a good job in the brunt of the work. The policy committee, as I said, made decisions, but of course they all had to take it back to each of their boards or councils. So in the end, those boards and councils were also involved and approved, but the work was done at the policy committee and TAC level.
Thanks, Dale. You're welcome. And this is part of, the continuing education of what's going on statewide and how things are being accomplished. And this is just a picture. I don't advise having 30 people on an advisory committee, but that's what we have up in Santa Rosa, one of the areas I'm working in. And I think the point is that, and that we're going to continue to make, we have an evolving, a challenging job to do. And we're going to make some mistakes, hopefully not very many, but we're going to move this forward effectively, and that committees are going to be a big part of it. And the foundation of decisions have to be sound science, sound technical work to make policy decisions, and those should be separate. And that's really, I think, where we're coming from on that as a beginning. And I'm going to go through a few slides real quick. I want to make sure everybody understands where this is coming from, and or refresh your memory, if I may. It comes, the public notification participation comes out of 10727.8. And I want to highlight that it says in the law the Groundwater Sustainability Agency may appoint and consult with the advisory committee consisting of interested parties. Now, I want to digress a moment and say I'm responsible for causing the naming confusion, and I don't want people to dwell on nomenclature. I just want people to understand that, first of all, this JPA board has made it clear that meaningful participation is important, that we want to move forward on this quickly and get this going. And then the other thing is that these groundwater, this advisory is going to be an advisory. There will be an advisory. They will provide advice to the JPA board, and the JPA board will take that advice and make sound decisions based on science and policy that's being offered, okay? And so just a little bit more. And so this is another piece in the law, considering the interests of all beneficial uses and users. We've all seen these before if you've been to these meetings, so it shouldn't be anything new. An outreach and output. Part of the GSA formation documentation we have to provide when we file to be a GSA is an explanation of how the interests of all beneficial uses and users will be incorporated in the development and operation of the GSA. And the other thing is a list of interested parties. And believe me, we're maintaining that list. We've been fortunate to have the district step up and have Lauren Duffy now maintaining that for us. So that's very good, and we appreciate that. And then the interested parties, besides the JPA board members that we've identified so far, are listed here: agriculture, business, domestic well owners. I'm glad the RCD's on there. I guess now they can be on the appointed list based on the direction today. Inyo Current Community Services District serving a disadvantaged community, and then Searles Valley Minerals. Now to the meat of it. So we've come up with several different options we've been talking about. This is kind of the first one is, okay, this one thing that could happen is that the JPA board could each, including the associate boards, could each appoint somebody to an advisory. Number two would be adding one seat for each of these designated parties. That's agriculture, domestic well owner, environmental, and business. And then the third option that staff pretty much landed on as far as a recommendation goes is shown here, and that's having members of the various JPA voting and non-voting members, and then 2 seats for ag, 2 seats for domestic well owners, one of those seats being a mutual water company type that serves, I guess it's more than 4 connections, right, Phil? We just heard that. Searles Valley Minerals, Inyo Kern CSD, again, Eastern Kern County RCD, and then a business representative. So that's where we landed. And we've got some additional possible committees. Again, we've been talking about the technical committee. The discussions there have bounced around between having simply one JPA board member appointed to having a more similar structure to what this advisory committee is we're talking about. We haven't landed on anything, but hopefully today we'll get some input, then potentially having a public outreach and communications committee. Some other things that we might think about down the road is in terms of funding. And when I say that, looking for grant funds, for example, having a committee looking for funds. That's something that's going to be important. And then we've got policy and procedures, but those are all down the roads. Anyway, so with that, I think we're at the point where we'd like to turn to the board and look for questions and move this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. If you grab a seat or stay close, we'll probably have you back up.
Okay.
Any immediate questions from the board before I open public hearing? Mr. Brown.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I like the composition. I'm just curious, how do we, like business would be a good one. Is there would there be a pool? I know that in here it says that people fill out applications and we'll decide as a board. But would we come up with our own criteria about what constitutes a business? Because you've got so many businesses, not necessarily the biggest one, maybe the most interested one, I don't know. So that's how is that our intention, Mr. Chair?
I don't know. I think we're going to go back to that slide because I think it's a real good question. Is what you're talking about as a business? Are you talking to Chamber of Commerce, Board of Realtors?
Well, all of these are placeholders
for an ice cream stand.
Yeah, exactly. And then so agriculture is 2, domestic well owners is 2. There's a lot of domestic well owners, so I don't know what would be the fairest way to do that. That's just a question. It's a general question, but I agree with the placeholders. I just how do we decide?
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We're going to get there through the course of today and maybe future discussions. Vice Chair.
Go ahead. I'd like to say something for the record. I had promised that I would come back to the City Council for these major decisions, that I would not come back to them to say whether we're going to meet on Tuesday or Wednesday at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, but important things that affect the total. And I think this has not, we received this on Thursday. It was after our council meeting, and I would like to be able to have the input from my council. So at this point in time, I cannot make a decision, but I want to reserve that right to make a decision at some point in time.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Anyone else? Thoughts before we go to the public? Okay, let's open the public hearing and listen to what you people have to say.
Ron Kosinski. You mentioned one group earlier that you said, in fact, you're going to overlap their meeting that I didn't see brought up at all, the Indian Wells Valley Cooperative Groundwater Management Group. You know, I didn't see them on your list of possible consideration for the advisory group, but it was already said that what important work they're doing. So I just want to bring that up, that unless it's somehow melded into the description here, which I don't see.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Mr. Parker, do you have any answer for that question?
Yes, I mean, that's been our intention all along, is that, in fact, I think we've discussed it with the co-op group, and the co-op group has actually requested that to know how they will be incorporated or integrated with this new GSA. And I think our intention is that we would migrate these into these committees, the cooperative group, and that they could continue to function with the appropriate membership, designated membership, and we've tried to reflect that actually on the committee structure so that hopefully we don't have redundant meetings, that we can move all the operations of the co-op group into an advisory and a technical meeting. And I've gotten positive response from the co-op so far. I hope I don't hear a negative response today, but in saying so, but that's basically what I've heard from the co-op.
Yeah, you have a lot of players already involved in the co-op, what you're talking about, and plus they've done a lot of great work, and there's a lot of great work they're still doing, as you know, because you sit there as well. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. Mr. Chair, Donna Hawker with the Ridgecrest Area Association Realtors Office. I have been directed by my board of directors to request that 2 realtors, and they would be rotating realtors, if you will, be able to serve on one of your committees. I think business might fit, but because of land use issues that will come up with this process, we request.
Great. Got it. You're applying for one of those positions on this committee.
Two realtors, 1 position, and they would rotate.
Okay. One position, and you'd fill those bills any way you want.
The board of directors would assign those.
Thank you.
2 people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are we taking, Alan? Are you taking that note? Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Joshua Nugent, and I'm here on behalf of Mojave Pistachios and Nugent Farms. First of all, I wanted to thank you guys for putting the development committee on the agenda so early in the process, as you guys promised from the beginning. This prompt attention is welcomed and appreciated. Mojave Pistachios is a significant stakeholder in the Indian Wells Valley as a groundwater pumper. Our GSA will be better and will work stronger if we follow Sigma's call for inclusivity of all stakeholders. After reviewing the GSP Development Committee structure, we would request a small alteration to the number of seats allowed for ag. Meaningful participation can be best achieved by allowing for 2 seats for the major ag water users, Mojave Pistachios and the Alfalfa Ranch, along with a 3rd seat for the smaller ag pumpers. A 3rd seat for the smaller ag producers would strengthen the GSP Development Committee and help support the common goals of the public agencies, the community, and all the other stakeholders. The goals here is to solicit meaningful participation from all stakeholders. Adding a third seat for the smaller ag pumpers would be a great step towards genuine, meaningful participation, and I request this board add the seat when adopting the advisory committee structure, possibly today. Thanks again, and especially to Chairman Gleason for fulfilling his commitment to represent ag. So thank you guys.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Through the chair, Derek Hoffman of Gresham Savage, legal counsel for Meadowbrook. When I look at the proposal today, I don't see a groundwater sustainability plan development committee, as was previously discussed, but the structure that I do see does show some promise. And I do want to express appreciation for staff for making a concerted effort to start working on this. I think it does show promise, and I think it is a step forward in that direction. So thank you to those that have worked on that. As I understand it, looking at this proposal, and I do understand that it is a proposal, and discussions are continuing, and I also understand that the details are to be included in the bylaws. But what I see with this Policy Advisory Committee is a committee that is engaged intimately in establishing the policy, the management objectives, the alternatives, the fees question, a lot of the major high-level issues. And correct me if I'm wrong, please. I also see this committee, if I'm reading this correctly, in this list, this summary list of assignments, as being intimately involved in the technical and data generation component of developing the GSP. So I think those are good things. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong. I also see here that the board would use a third-party consultant. And one of the concerns we have with this structure is that if a consultant is used, to what extent do the committee members are involved in working with that consultant? In other words, it needs to be along the way. It needs to be at incremental phases. It needs to be intimate involvement with that consultant. And if this is the approach that the board is going to follow, and we don't necessarily approve it either way, I think the details need to be fleshed out. But if this is the approach the board would follow, then I'd suggest that that consultant be selected with comments from the committee, and that they be involved in the selection process. The second and major issue really that we have with this structure as proposed today is that you're setting it up to exclude important agricultural interests. With 2 seats for ag that are relegated to an application process, that is underrepresentation for agriculture, in our opinion, especially considering, as you've heard many comments today, about agricultural being some of the larger pumpers in the valley. The application process itself is questionable at this point. It's opaque, frankly. There's no criteria. And I know that some of this will be discussed later. But the concern from Meadowbrook is that it's a stumbling block to meaningful participation for all the major agricultural stakeholders, including Meadowbrook, in this committee.
Could you say? I didn't understand what you just said. Could you say that again?
Using an application process is opaque, and it doesn't provide the criteria for figuring out who would be on this committee representing ag. And I believe that the process, as it's framed up here, does not provide sufficient representation opportunity for all the major agricultural stakeholders, including Meadowbrook. Also, looking at the structure, one of the items I notice is that private pumpers like Searles Valley Minerals, and as of today, well, they're not a private pumper, but Eastern Kern Resource Conservation District, entities who have previously requested either membership positions on the board or committees have now have that. And so my request would be that Meadowbrook likewise be named as a member of this committee by name. I think that's something we've asked for many times. We've asked for reasonable assurances that that would happen. We've been told that there'd be reasonable opportunity, and we'd be given reasonable assurances for that. But again, this application process that's presented here does not give that type of reasonable assurance. So again, we'd ask that Meadowbrook be represented on the committee by name in the structure and in the bylaws. I have 2 quick questions. One is, I heard Mr. Hall say earlier, and this is through Mr. Chair, of course, that there is a voting component on this policy advisory committee. My question is that so, and how would that work?
Mr. Hall, if you're ready to answer, go ahead. If you're not. Tell me.
Well, I'm not sure what the JPA board is going to do, Mr. Hoffman. As you know, on phone calls we've had, your group had proposed a sort of voting structure in which the GSP would go through the committee. The committee would then comment on it and put together a proposal for the board to review. All of the attorneys for the now board members were there. They generally agreed that that was probably a pretty good idea. So I'm assuming that's the path that will be followed in the future. But, you know, that's an assumption. It's not exactly doing much of an advisory if it's not voting and coming to a conclusion and advising. So,
Mr. Parker.
Yeah, I could just add to that. I think one of the things we've been talking about is also working towards consensus and have some sort of conflict resolution piece to it. Right now, we're just trying to work on membership. But this is all to be developed along with a more formal application process, as you pointed out, that we don't mention. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not saying we support the application process, but I'm pointing out that there are issues in that. With regard to the bylaws, and I don't want to jump ahead out of order on the agenda. I know legal counsel is another issue today, but for now, who is responsible for generating the bylaws? Who is managing that process? And will there be iterations of those made available to the public?
I want to say hell if I know, but I think that would be inappropriate, so I won't say that. Mr. Hall or Mr. Christensen, can you help me out there?
Go ahead. Yeah. Keith Lemieux is going to take the first crack at them. As I'm sure you're aware, Derek, 99% of those bylaws is going to be very generic boilerplate stuff. There's going to be a little bit that'll then have policy, i.e. the advisory committee. So he's taking first crack at it. He's at a mediation, I believe, today. So, you know, we're trying to toddle before we walk, before we run. We're still at the toddle stage. They'll be coming forward, I would assume, probably. I can't imagine that we won't have them completed I can't imagine we will not have them packaged up, ready to go within the next 60 days. So,
you imagine you will have them available in 60 days?
Yes.
Thank you.
Double negative there. Sorry.
Last question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I look at the proposal by staff. It's the second page of the structure outline, and it's talking about the application process. And it says, after talking about the 5 appointments, it says the last sentence, board members could also choose from applications to make their appointments as well. And my question is, applications to which seats?
I'd be happy to answer that. In the report, we talk about 3 different types of committees. A GSP advisory or development committee is one, an outreach committee, and a technical committee. The discussion later in the board letter, the staff report, is talking about the GSP development committee. But it could apply to any of the committees. That's again where we're sort of learning to walk here. Application process could take on many forms. I've seen many different ways of doing that. So I can't tell you how that. Sometimes an application process could be just filling out an application. The board makes a recommendation, or the staff makes a recommendation to the board based on qualifications. We could have guidance on behalf of the board, or have some structure in place that says of the ag. If there was an ag position, ag means XYZ. They need to have this, and this in order to qualify. But again, those decisions can be made today, tomorrow, at future meetings. We didn't get in. We're trying to get to committees first, and go from there. Go into the detail later.
Final comment, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman. I still see that this is a process, but I am concerned that it is rather opaque from the perspective of Meadowbrook, having a reasonable assurance that it can be on the committee. And I think the application process is the wrong way to go with respect to Meadowbrook. Meadowbrook is it would be appropriate to include Meadowbrook as a named entity on the committee, just as has been done for Searles Valley Minerals, for East Kern County Resource Conservation District, and also for Inyo Kern, who I don't recall ever having made a request specifically to be on the committee. And I'd ask that you consider including Meadowbrook on that committee by name.
Chairman
Thank
Gleaves.
you.
Thank you.
Chair, if I could clarify a couple things real quickly. Inyo Kern CSD is an eligible agency to be a GSA. They do not really have the resources to do that. They were involved early on in the process. We have named them specifically on the committee because of their agency status. East Kern Resource Conservation District, as we've already talked about today, should be a named party. Cyril's is named not as a mineral industrial user, but really they're named as a wholesaler to a regulated public utility. And regulated public utility providing domestic water service to numerous homes. So that's why they're named. And that's it. That was the criteria we were relying on when we named individuals.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you for your time.
Next up.
Judy Decker. I've heard what other people have to say. I've looked at your list. I feel, again, that the domestic well owner is underrepresented. You have one. The other is a mutual. If you are going to increase the agricultural representation, you need to increase the domestic well owner representation. And I will remind you that earlier myself and others brought up the fact that the people that live within the boundaries of the city live within the boundaries of the city of Ridgecrest are represented already by the city of Ridgecrest, the county of Kern, and the Indian Wells Valley Water District. The impact of an overdrafted basin is felt first by the domestic well owner, both in the lack of water to pump, in the lack of water quality, which is declining, and in the cost to deal with this. By definition, a domestic well owner is a pretty independent person because they have gone out, bought a parcel of land, sunk their money in a well, sunk their money bringing power to their place and putting in a lot. In a house, they're on their own. But they are the ones that are impacted the first. They are also the ones, collectively, that have the least amount of money. We can't afford to hire lawyers to represent us. I would also like to point out to you that the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District, of which I'm also a member of that board, their charter from the state says that their job is to assist agriculture. So in fact, while you have written down their environmental, and they do have grave concerns over the environment and have done much to protest the dust of solar farms in the Fremont Valley, their job is to assist agriculture. And I will also remind you that the heavy pumpers are the ones that unfortunately caused the problem. And yes, they need to be on your committees to help fix the problem. But again, if you are going to appoint more agricultural representatives, small or large, you need to appoint additional domestic well owners. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Decker. Next up.
My name's Joshua Nugent. I just had one small thing to add. I'm referencing a Kern County resolution that was passed by the Board of Supervisors. It says, for all other water users, including mutual water companies and the other private well owners, meaningful participation means the ability to participate on a groundwater sustainability development plan committee, provided that it doesn't violate ethics laws. So I guess I'd like to be a little more specific in my request that we have 3 seats for Ag, a named seat for Meadowbrook, a named seat for Mojave Mutual Water Company, and then a 3rd seat that maybe would follow the application process to allow all the other small Ag users. I guess really the reason behind that is when you get down to brass tacks and look at who's pumping how much water in this basin, it makes a lot of sense to have the major pumpers be named on the development committee. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up.
Lorelei Aviant, Director of Planning and Natural Resources for Kern County. I am seeing this just like everybody else is seeing this, and so I'd like to offer my thoughts as someone who has spent their entire career working on these kinds of committees, directing these types of large-scale resolutions. First, I think it's a great composition, but I want to remind the people who are concerned about this application process, your job on a committee like this is not to speak for yourself. If you are a representative of someone like a domestic well owner, you're supposed to go back and meet with your well owners and bring their ideas forward. Otherwise, we have a 100-member committee. I have done massive large-scale projects, maybe 17, 18, maybe 20. At 20, you can get something done. Anything above that, we'll be here in 2025, still trying to work it out. So I'm just offering my opinions here. The second issue is I actually, if I get on the wrong side of someone, I apologize. This is off the cuff. I do support the idea of named people, because what it comes down to in a plan like this is a domestic well owner is going to go back to a group. Sears Valley is going to go back to their board. Or Mojave Pistachio is going to go back to their people. So their representation is much more about them, and having them in the meeting makes it move forward rather than them having to come in as public comment. So I just wanted to give you some of those thoughts and also say that consensus building is based on being in the trenches, but it's also based on the trenches going out and talking to hundreds of people and bringing those ideas forward. So I just wanted to offer that.
Thank you.
West Katzenstein, 1450 Sidnor. And one thing I found in this, that I found missing this document a bit, and maybe it's premature to expect it, but it's kind of like folks are jockeying to try to get the most votes on this. The advisory committee. I want to be sure I get the language right here. But I think what's really going to matter is how you task those folks. And I think if I were in your shoes, I would say we would like a family of proposed plans, maybe one that happens as like a linear fashion over a certain number of years, and maybe something that expedites it. So I would expect you would be tasking these folks to provide a family of different ways to proceed, a family of plans that you guys would then vote on. So I think if you deal with the advisory committee in that fashion, then this whole idea that there seems to jockeying for who gets the most votes might get factored out. As long as this advisory committee, as long as all ideas come forward and nobody feels that there is not a plan that represents their view as to how it might proceed. I didn't really see any discussion of how they might be tasked in this document, and that may be premature, but that's my suggestion, that you don't task this group with one plan, you task them with a family of plans, and maybe you give them guidance as to what you might expect within that family of plans.
Thanks, sir.
In Bill Manofsky, 2700 Matarango. In response to Mrs. Decker, the question that I have to council through you is, in order for private well owners to establish a seat on this board, I'm concerned that the ratepayers would still be footing the bill and that they pay nothing. Would they, in order to be included, are de minimis user rights waivable? That's the question. Because I as a ratepayer, and I would assume agriculture, because they're open to pumping taxes and other fees, whereas de minimis users would have a free seat on this board, I would request that they be included in any fee structure or taxation. In order to do that, is de minimis user rights waivable?
Thanks. I don't think we have a question answer for you right now because we haven't designed this committee yet, but as we go forward, we'll get an answer to you.
For my previous questions, particularly ones related to the Navy, who do I address them to? Do I send them to you or to your office?
What was your question?
The question was water use by the Navy as far as...
I think Commander Longbottom, you can take care of that?
Yeah, I'll get with you afterwards. And
Okay.
If you get them to me.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Yes. Harold Manis, private well owner. I wanted to ask, I have a question for you. Are you taking into account the amount of power you're giving out to the agriculture versus the private well owner? In other words, if you have 2 or 3 of their being represented and they're using 90% of the water in the valley, then the private well owners can go dry, and as I said, we're left hanging out to dry. Whereas as has happened in the past, as history has shown, that the agriculture, when their water goes bad or the arsenic comes in and they can't grow anymore, they get up and leave. They might just give up and leave the valley, and we're left here with land that we can build houses on, but we can't. And so the private well owner is still, who is a majority in the valley, so to speak, of wells are privately owned. And if you give the amount of power that they want to have seats on your board, you should. I'm leading up to, they should be taxed the highest who uses the most water. And that's the agriculture. And they should be proportionally taxed so they, as I understood in the beginning, our water table's going down. Okay? That's been going down a foot a year for at least 30 or 40 years that I know of. And we want to stop that. So you should make it to where the agriculture starts to minimize or use less water until that water level balances out. Then your problem will be solved. And that means not turning over any of the power by having seats on the board by those who are out to gain most monetarily by it. Because if they're up there calling out and they're making the most money on it, this is a business for them. Most of the private well owners in the valley are here. We're living. That's our what? We're going to have to all start renting trucks and have water delivered? The agriculture in the valley shouldn't have that much power by being on your board, unless you want to have a proportional number of private well owners, which would counter what the lady was explaining on having too many people on the board. So I wanted you to just make sure that they're asked the question, are you taking into account just what you're doing with the power that you're giving out by giving out seats on the board, so that we don't run into something. We want, what is the purpose of the board is what it leads up to. Is your purpose to stop the groundwater from going down by a foot a year? Or are you just out to get the control for the state of our water?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Tom Wicknick. Just real quickly, without getting into the next agenda item, which is to file for the GSA. My question is that this discussion is good at this point, but isn't this discussion assuming that you're going to become the GSA? Because what happens to this authority if you don't become a GSA?
We're intent is to become a GSA.
Okay. So that's the pretext that we're having this discussion today then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So eventually you're going to wind up with it. In my opinion, you're going to have a manager and probably a secretary in the office that's going to help implement all the stuff that this board is now putting together in connection with approving for an attorney. And my question would be is that when Mayor Breeden brought up about taking the recommendation back to the council, my concern is that's appropriate and necessary thing to do, and you all will have that responsibility. Not getting caught in a vicious circle in that back and forth. And my point, I'll just come to the conclusion, is that when you start going back to the councils or your commissions or the supervisor boards, you should have a recommendation from this board. This is what the board is thinking about doing. And say this is what they're doing, and then get their inputs from them and come back to this board. So it's a procedural thing where I don't see. I'm afraid of you getting caught in this round circle of back and forth, back and forth. Well, now it's alternate 3. Now it's alternate 2, or whatever it might be. My encouragement would be is you go back to the boards when you have a basic consensus from the board.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. Dale Hledik. I'm a domestic well owner. And my concern is representation. We've been to these meetings for months and months. And again, the board has said or promised that there'd be adequate representation for domestic well owners. By the way, there's hundreds of them. And I'm sorry I didn't do my homework and call Kern County and say how many wells are out there. Because, of course, they have that on record. We all have to put in an application for a well. I didn't do that. Sorry. I will. Anyway, hundreds of us. And so with only one single dwelling representative on this advisory committee, I think that's a disservice because there are so many and in so many different positions, whatever, around the basin. We're on all different sides, just not in the city itself. So by having one, you're not, I don't think you're allowing for position and different aspects of the domestic well owner as well. So I would please consider that I think we're underrepresented, and I'm glad you did include the mutuals. And again, there's lots of those too. I don't know how many. So thank you.
Did you state your name, please, for the record?
I think I did. Del Hledik.
I just didn't.
If I
hear
didn't,
you. Thank you.
Yeah. Spell it, please.
Anthony Brown for Mojave Pistachios and Nugent Farms. I wanted to just make one statement and ask one question. The first statement I'm probably in a unique position to actually ask, as you may be able to tell from my accent. You may recall that many years ago, my ancestors were kicked out of this country, and for one of the reasons cited was taxation without representation. Clearly, we've heard about the fact that entities in the valley are going to be taxed, perhaps some kind of pump tax, replenishment fee, to pay for perhaps not only the implementation of the GSP, but perhaps other water projects. And one of the things would be if you're a major water producer and you're going to be subject to a pump tax, but you're denied the ability to participate on the GSP Development Committee, is that, in fact, once again, taxation without representation?
Thanks, sir.
That's my amusing comment. The second question I had relates to the comment that Joshua made regarding the resolution. In forming the GSA, the county had specific language in the resolution that stated that major water pumpers in particular would be allowed to participate through their membership on the GSP committee. If, say, for example, we had an agricultural entity that requested to be on the committee but was denied through the application process, would that in fact be a breach of that resolution? And I guess that's a question I have for Council.
That we'll get an answer to you. Thank you very much. Next up.
Ron Kosinski. And in listening to all this, someone made a point about it looks like people are vying for a number of positions or whatever to have a certain number of votes. In my short tenure, as young as I am, through being on certain boards, committees, development projects and such, I found there's three types of people that usually want to get appointed or will run for office or may even apply. You have those that just want to tick off their resume. You have those that want to represent a special agenda of their own or special interest. And then you have those who truly want to represent their constituency and bring something to the body that they're working on to represent everybody. And I just advise you that you're going through all this, and you probably already know that. It's number 3 you're concerned about. And stay clear of the ones that have special agendas. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Harold Manis, one follow-up with the taxation without representation. This is the private well owners are here for subsistence. They need that water to live on, to subside. The pistachio or the agriculture in the valley is here to make a profit, and they're not here to live and retire and sit. I put my 20 years in on the base, okay, and I retired in this valley, and as many of the military that I've known, if they stay here a year, they'll want to come back and look at this as a place to retire also. But without water, what's here? And that's what's happening when the quality of the water is going down, because it's being used at a increasing rate to grow a profit instead of being here. And that's where the increase in cost for those who are using it beyond their own individual needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manis. Mr. Manis. I believe we're at the end, so let me close public session real quick. Closed. Okay, let's bring it back to the board for comments and consideration and a vote on item number 9. Excuse me, item number 9. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had a question regarding, there was questions about whether certain organizations or groups had enough seats on the proposed alternative number 3, which we seem to be focused on our conversation on. When this committee is ultimately formed in the bylaws and starts to meet, it would be my expectation that they would follow the Brown Act and the public would be invited to those meetings and able to participate. So the staff's recommendation is to set up a anywhere from 7 to 15 member advisory committee that takes input, just as we are today, from the public or from their groups and making a recommendation to this board, correct?
That, through the chair, that's correct. That would be a Brown Act open meeting committee where any public could show up and speak. Then the meetings would be noticed.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, I'll jump in. I didn't see a lot of coordination with other committees. But before I get to that, let me talk to you in my paradigm of how I see this GSP Development Committee or Advisory Committee, whatever it is. I think that the state of California has given us a one-statement objective. We need a plan that's going to guarantee a balanced aquifer by 2040. That is the point to which we are all going, no matter what level of activity you perform and participation in getting to where we want to go. That's where we're all going. That's the goal. Just beneath them, there is us, the GSA committee, the GSA, not a committee, the GSA, whose job is to develop strategic objectives and strategic thought so that we can, break down that one statement into how are we going to achieve that? How, why, when, and where are we going to achieve that? And that's our job. Down one level below that is these committees, whether it's the GSP committee or the advisory committee or the tactical advisory committee or whatever committees we develop. Their job is going to be to develop, take assignments and project tasks from the strategic level and break them down into tactical development of ideas and granular development and take it from concepts to ideas to goals to tasks. And so they're at the tasks and they're trying to develop all these things. And it's not going to be the GSA is not going to say, develop a GSP farming. In my mind, the GSA is going to say, okay, this is what we need. These are the thoughts we need you to come up with this very complex plan. These are the timelines associated with achieving those particular objectives. For example, this solar plant thing that we were talking about earlier. The GSA is going to say to the GSP Development Committee, is independent or as part of the GSP, we want your help, ideas, and consideration for how we're going to work with the county and how we're going to interface with other agencies to make sure this works, and how does it best fit our strategic goals of getting to that one statement that the state gave us. We're going to say we want we want a recharge study, and we want that analyzed, and we want that to have better, more refined information, and we need that by a certain timeline. And then that's going to fold into another part of the GSP, and we're going to be constantly providing direction, guidance, and assistance from a strategic perspective to this GSP as they develop the tasks and move with this information and develop clouds of information at different times so that in some way at the end of the road we have something that coalesces together into a GSP. It also doesn't mean that we're going to wait. We're not going to take action until the GSP is developed. We need to take independent action with cooperation from this committee or without outside cooperation of this committee to make things move. For example, again, like the solar plan, we're not going to sit back and wait for a committee to review the tenets of a plan. We're moving on it. We will keep them informed. We will ask for their participation, but we're not bound to their decisions or their recommendations. We are going to make those decisions because it fits our strategic model and what we strategically want to achieve. So I didn't see a lot of that in this structure, and I don't like this structure. I look at that and I see. I heard a lot of people talk, and I'm surprised the Navy didn't have a perspective, because I see one block that says Navy on it, and that's all. And I don't think that if any group is unfairly represented, I see one Navy and 2 ag and 1 domestic well, 2 domestic wells. I don't like the fact that Searles Valley is on it. Not because I don't like Searles Valley, I love Searles Valley. But if we're putting Searles Valley on it, I thought Mr. Hoffman made a great point. Why aren't we putting other entities on it that have the same water use or like water use that Searles has? So you're a water user, they're a water user. Why are you on it and they're not? I don't like that. And so there's some things about this whole deal I don't like. I like the ideas, but I don't think it paints the picture that I want painted. It doesn't. Assigning seats, there's something about it. I know we have to go through some structure like that, but I'm not sure this does it for me, because this is so, I'm going to take care of my piece of the pie. Everybody's out to fight for their piece of pie, and I want to hear more of, we have a common problem that we need to solve. And we need to identify who we are, what our core is, and then we need to satisfy that core. And we need to make, as we go through this change in water consumption and reduction, everybody's going to feel pain. How do we make this pain as most tolerable as we possibly can for people as we all go through this change? So my thoughts are, I think this needs work. I'm not there with any of the alternates at the present time, and I think I agree with Peggy that I'm going to need to bring something back to my board. I'd like to have something in a little better shape than this. I wish I could give you more specifics, but I can't, because it's a strategic thought, and we need to bang that around a little better. Let me ask you a question. How did we do that? We developed this idea by staff getting together, and who was on the staff? Who's it? Not names, but I mean,
all the agencies. The Navy, I would admit, the Navy was not involved in that discussion, but all the member agencies here of the 5, we did. Perhaps we made that was a faux pas. But yeah, we had several discussions. We knew this would be a challenge.
Yeah.
So
I think I hear you. I appreciate that. It's not an easy task. And I think fair representation is something we're struggling to achieve. I don't believe we'll ever get there. We're just going to do the best we can. And if somebody resents the fact that we're not doing fair representation, they need to take that up at the state, not this board. We're doing the best we can within the confines of the state law. So
one thought, Mick.
Yes, sir.
Is you've kind of, and we've heard comments, and I think Lorelei made the comment about representing constituent groups. I think that's an important aspect to underscore. Other people made comments about their concern about being represented, and I think part of it is perhaps having a more well-developed narrative of what the responsibilities and roles of the committee would be, as well as looking at what's going on in the basin already, the studies that are ongoing, and how those fit into developing the plan. And then kind of one person mentioned an iterative process to develop the plan. How those pieces would break out might be helpful to also lay out in terms of how this would be developed. And that also helps explain what the committee's role is going to be.
Bingo. I think you hit the nail right in the head, and that will do it for me. I think that this board needs to develop a mission statement and assign it to a team to develop a mechanism Call it the GSP Development Committee, Development Advisory Committee, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. But we need a mission statement to say what we want to achieve and how we want you to go about doing your chores. And then we talk about populating the organization so that it can work and achieve that mission statement. I think we need mission statements for this Development Advisory Committee. I think we need mission statements for our Public Outreach Committee. I think we need mission statements for our, there was another committee in here, Technical. So I think we need, it's our job, we're not doing our job. We need to give assignments to the staff to say, this is what we want you to build a structure to perform for us. That's what we need to do. We also got to understand the fact that these committees are part of a larger group, and somehow information has to move between committees, up and down this chain, all through this organization. So it's not stovepipe or things that just independently operate within certain parameters. They have to work together to achieve the one goal that the state has given us. I don't see that in this. I don't think this is designed for that, but I would like to see that also. So my assignment, what I would like to do is to not necessarily approve this, but I would like to assign the task to this GSA to develop mission statements for our organizational structure and come back to this committee with mission statements that assign the projects, tasks, roles, and responsibilities we want each committee to do. And then once we understand what we want each committee to do, then we build the structure to perform that function. Does that make sense? Does anybody else agree or disagree with that?
I think that makes sense. I do see this Policy and Planning Committee as having a more immediate role for us than the rest of the committees that look like they'll also be good, productive elements for planning as we go forward. But our immediate task, which we're going to discuss in the next agenda item, is to make application to the state to become a GSA. And we want to do that as soon as possible. And as Mr. Parker touched on, one of the requirements to do that is to have an explanation to the state DWR of how we're addressing the interests of all the beneficial users in the valley. And the way I look at this committee is that's what we're going to tell the state. Is we have this committee. It's got this good cross-sectional representation of the users in the valley, and that's our narrative addressing that requirement. So I'd certainly be agreeable to taking this back for next meeting if that's what you feel you need to do. But I do think we need to get this committee in particular settled on so we can use it for that application purpose moving forward soon.
Ms. Page, are you saying that we need to have this structure of this committee done before we submit for GSA?
No, but I think we should have a decision on what it's going to look like. You know, if not the bylaws language, but here's our Policy and Planning Committee, DWR. This is how we're addressing the interests of the beneficial users in the valley. At least that's how I look at this committee. Maybe there's other opinions on that, though.
Thanks, sir.
I'll be brief.
Sure, go for it.
So the way I look at this, it's an advisory committee for us to give us guidance. I have kind of a simple solution for now, especially if we want to file, is just take the numbers off. It doesn't have to be a vote number. It just has to be agencies. So we can say we're going to incorporate these agencies, these groups. That way there isn't, it is a complicated issue. What are you representing, though? When everybody says, well, I'm going to have 2 votes, 1 vote, well, you're having a vote on an advisory committee, but you're still going to advise, and we're still going to make the decision. We get to get stuck with that. So, I get all that. But if a simple solution in my mind, do away with the voting numbers. Just say these are the entities, involved, and then we can file for our plan, and then we can talk to our boards, and we can set up strategic committees to serve very specific functions, because everybody has their gifts and such. And I do agree that the groundwater management steering committee, or whatever we call it now, will be merged into this group, and we've been talking about that for a very long time. So that'll help a lot, and it's already representing a lot of places. So I'm not sure the voting number or anything is significant is that everybody's involved, and so I wouldn't have a problem putting anybody's name on here. It does. Lorelei has a really good point. If you get really big, it doesn't do anything. So maybe we parse it into subcommittees or something. But for now, if we just took away vote numbers, whatever, put agencies, whatever, then we can maybe apply. If it's not time sensitive, and we can wait another month and we can come back with something a little better.
Yes, sir.
Yep. I would like to say that I'm supportive of your proposal to move forward with at least determining the mission for these committees and then developing the structure. The one question that I'd like to add to, once we get past the mission and then start discussing structure, if maybe the Kern County agencies could think about this, is in terms of that structure of all these committees and how they work together in advising the board of directors here, is this original proposal identified that there were a certain number of seats that would have to apply, and this board would make a decision as to whether or not who represented that group on the advisory committee for the GSP. What I'd like to kind of, and there were some statements made here about proper representation and discussion about people sitting in the committee should be representing their user group, not necessarily their own individual interests. So one of the things I'd like staff, when they get to that point of evaluating potential structures, and Peter just mentioned the idea of potentially of subcommittees, is to evaluate whether they would recommend continuing this application process for certain seats under certain groups, or if they would recommend as an alternative to allow there to be subcommittees set up for the different user groups and have them pick who they want to be on the advisory group. And so it's not us making a call between two different domestic well owners. It's their group coming together and reviewing issues and deciding who they want to represent their point of view on the advisory committee. So I'd like that to be considered as part of the process, and specifically, when we do get to that point, to kind of know how you guys feel about that approach.
Very smart.
Through the chair, Supervisor, I don't understand what you said. Who is they that is going to make that decision?
And thank you for promoting me, but I'm actually a staff member for the County of San Bernardino Administrative Office.
But you look so important.
I know that, but you're operating that position.
Yes, no, I understand that. When I say they, is that we've identified, the staff has identified in these alternative 3 different groups of users of water and uses of water: agriculture, domestic well owners. Searles Valley Minerals could be considered either industrial or it could be a domestic water provider, and business. Is the idea of having a subcommittee, say on ag, where they can set, they could have just be everybody that wants to show up to a meeting could provide input. They could set their own structure to say that they have a voting member of their subcommittee. But basically, ag all gets together and say the recommendation of the structure is that ag has 2 or 3 seats on this committee. Ag then decides amongst themselves in a separate meeting who they want to actually sit on the advisory committee. That was I'm not saying that should necessarily be the way it should be, but as an alternative, potentially asking this board to decide between, say we got 5 applications from ag and having to decide which 2 or 3 we wanted to appoint to the committee, have staff evaluate a structure where the ag users themselves pick who they want to be their 2 or 3 representatives on the advisory committee as an alternative to be evaluated. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, where are we?
12:58.
I got that. Stare me right in the eyes. Ms. Christensen.
I'll be short. Just so the board understands, this is good. This is good feedback. More specific is great. But what I can see happening is, so you know, and maybe you've already thought through this, but we'll come back with some concepts, some mission statements for each of these committees and how they can interconnect. And this will slow down the committee choosing committee members or structure of the committee considerably, because what I've heard is that agencies want to go back to their, so I could see this, so let's say in 2 meetings in October, let's say in November we came back with, after another meeting or discussion, and then gave you a structure, you would still be having to go back to your board and get feedback. So now we're into December, January. So I just want you to know that we're going to be working parallel processes here. And so it's going to take some time, just so you know that. We're good with that.
Okay, I hear you. Appreciate it. What I'd like to do, I would like for this board to take a vote today to assign 2 members, and I think those 2 members should be myself and Mr. Brown, to be honcho this development committee, to come up with some ideas, work on creating some mission statements, socialize those mission statements throughout the board, so that when we come back, we have a pretty good idea of what we're thinking, and that we have a pretty good idea that we have a good handle on what we're talking about by the next meeting, and then we can move forward. Does that sound like a plan to anybody?
Only if you buy lunch.
I'll buy you lunch.
There is one important thing, because we all meet all the time, and all of our board members want to be part of our process. It would be really good if we did all this before all of our next board meetings. So, because that was kind of our problem. This came out one day after our board meeting. Not anybody's problem. It's just, I was giving my marching orders. So there you go.
I hear you.
I got it.
I was too.
I'm on board.
Okay, so I would like to hear a motion from some member of this board.
I will move the chairman's recommendation.
Okay. We got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Second was
I did.
Ms. Breeden. Okay, moving right along. Speed of moving trees. Number 10, approval of IWVGA to file notice with the Department of Water Resources of intention to form a groundwater sustainability agency for the Indian Wells Valley Water Basin. Who's going to lead this off, Mr. Christensen?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The intent with the formation of the JPA was for this body to become the GSA, to file with the state. The county, who I work for, in addition to working for you, has filed a couple of those applications for actually overlapping a couple of agencies' applications in the San Joaquin Valley, southern San Joaquin. So we have some experience doing that. That takes some work, but it's not a difficult process. This recommendation is sort of accompanies with it. One of the things we have to do in order to become a GSA is first have a public hearing. And so our thought was that we would, along with the filing, first you have to have a public hearing, and then we would bring a resolution to you to form the GSA. At the public hearing, you could act on that whenever you have that public hearing. But you would not have to. You could just take a public hearing and let it sit for a while. I would not recommend that, but and here's why I would not recommend that. You have 6 months from today to file safely, as I see it, as we see it. June 30th is the deadline. There is a 90-day waiting period for someone to file a competing GSA. So from June 30th, you go backwards to March 31st. That's roughly 6 months from today. Some would argue that you could go later. You could file June 30th, and then you could let the 90-day. I would not do that. I don't think that's a good. That's a risky proposition, and I don't think you need to. You would be the exclusive GSA for the valley, or for this basin. I don't know that there's anybody else that's indicated they would file over the top. And really, it would just be starting the GSA, and much of the work would be done in other things that we've talked about today in committees and so forth. Just some thoughts about why. we've always felt that there's a shortage of people to do technical work, and the sooner you get organized, and the sooner we can get a consultant that does technical work. Tim does work for us, but he doesn't do the detailed technical work. We would have to hire out, or in some way figure out how that's going to be done. And we believe that the sooner you make that decision, the better. Again, filing is important for that. We can't assess any fees on behalf of the GSA until we are a GSA. So and when we say assess fees, you could assess each other. You could do a partial tax. You could do a pumping tax, all those things. But until you form the GSA, you really can't do that. And we also see a parallel path going along with committees. Let me give you some information from the board letter. A total of 207 GSA notification formation letters have been filed with DWR. So that means that many. 96 applications have been named exclusive. In other words, the 90 days have passed from their original filing, and they are now the GSA. So 96 agencies are the GSAs. They're considered exclusive. So we're not ahead of the game by any means. We are ahead of the game in the sense that we are a pretty cooperative group. I don't know that there's very many of those. There's a few. So that was our rationale for doing that. You don't have to file right away, but there is a window that is closing, and filing doesn't kick in anything. Given that what we talked about earlier about committees, the committee work would be done parallel to the filing of the GSA. I would not wait until the GSA until committee structure is completed to file as the GSA, because I think you will be up against deadlines that you don't need to be up against. So with that, I'm sure Phil could add some things, but that's a staff report.
So I understand, Mr. Christensen, that the recommendation is to set a public hearing today and prepare formation materials to file for GSA.
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any immediate?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on something that Helen said, and that is I've actually written a number of plans. So I'm surprised to hear that I'm not qualified.
Oh.
So.
I think you're qualified.
Anyway, I'm just surprised.
I know. Appreciate that. Okay, no immediate comments from the board. We'll go to I'm sorry, did you have?
I just want to understand, the recommendation that you are making is, I'm sorry, through the chair, the recommendation you are making is one to go ahead and file with the idea that we are going to do that, but we are not making the decision to do that?
You can. What I'm saying is you have to file. You have to set a public hearing.
That's what I mean, the hearing.
Yeah,
but we are not.
You at that meeting, we would have a resolution to file for you, but you don't have to act on that. It's really just to take public input, so so you could move on that. You could not move on it and let it sit for a month or two or three.
Okay, I
Thanks,
understand.
Sir. Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, just a clarification, I think when you do that, you have 60 days to file your documentation.
Thanks, sir.
30.
Okay, let's.
30. It's 30. Sorry, it's 30 days.
Okay, let's open public hearing. Anybody in the public wishing to come make comment?
Again, Bill Manofsky, 2700 Matarango. First, a comment to Harold. Harold, agriculture to Indian Wells Valley is not a parasitic relationship. They pay property taxes, and the more they pay, the less likely I have to. So they pay for the services, and with the $50 million shortfall in oil revenues in the county, we really need the money. My question has to do with the formation of the GSA. And I think the $1 million question that everybody's concerned about is the definition of the balanced aquifer. That's the trigger point that if we don't balance the aquifer, the state's going to come in and do it. Does balanced aquifer to you mean zero decline in the water table?
That has nothing to do with this particular item. If you'd keep your questions pertinent to the agenda item that we're discussing.
Well, the agenda item is the formation of the GSA.
The formation is the submission for an application to form a GSA.
Okay,
And the
I'll
timeline
reserve the
associated
question
with that.
for a later time.
And not that I'm discarding the question, I just think we need to stay on focus. Any other questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for comment, consideration, thoughts. Yes, sir.
I appreciate staff's comments regarding the timing issue, and I understand their position regarding not wanting to wait for the committee process to get completely through before we hold the public hearing. I'm a little concerned, though, that given the discussion we just had on the GSP advisory committee and the additional work that needs to be done by the ad hoc subcommittee we just formed, about having that public hearing at our next meeting in October as recommended. While I don't want to hold up the public hearing process and delay us too much, I kind of would like to hear what our ad hoc subcommittee has to say about the mission of our committees, and at least provide the public at the next meeting a little bit of insight in terms of what those committees will be doing and what your thoughts are. Because I think if we have the public hearing at the same day, we're going to get a lot of comments about, how can you say you're giving us all an opportunity to participate? We don't even know how that's going to happen yet. So I don't want to delay the public hearing too much, but I just feel like I'd like to give the two of you at least the next month to kind of formulate a little bit more insight as to what the committees will do before we hold that public meeting.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chair, I kind of agree. I think 1 month won't change much. I totally get your wanting to get it started. But given the fact that we had so much discussion just on the advisory committee, I think it would just be better just to wait at least one meeting to the next meeting, and maybe we can come with a little better game plan. The other thing is, because of the Brown Act and all these things we have to notice, and I can't talk to Peggy about the same thing I talked to Mick unless I'm drinking wine or something, and then that doesn't count, right? Anyways, so it's really difficult to have this really cool network of ideas floating through the emails and stuff. So if anybody could maybe guide me on how better to broadcast what we're doing, maybe we just have minutes from every single ad hoc. I don't know. Just an idea, because part of our problem is communication in real time, and because of the transparency and all this other stuff, that's kind of a tough deal these days. So if anybody can come up with a really good way for us to somehow communicate faster, then it would move better. Does that make sense?
Thanks, sir.
Just a thought, and you know this, I'm just going to, for the public's sake, we are very hesitant to sort of broadcast what we're doing in advance, in the sense that we do not want to try to form consensus prior to the, and so you're right, it's hard, but I just want the public to know, and I think you probably do too, we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that you get a chance to talk about it here.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Any other thoughts? And I'm waiting for a motion.
Chairman, I would move that we approve staff recommendation with the one modification, that we set the public hearing and the rest of the schedule to start in November rather than October.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Please cast. Everybody in favor say aye. Aye.
I have a question. But if you approve it now, don't you have to file in 30 days?
No, we would
Wait
just.
a minute. Now tell me, that's what I thought you told me.
No, once you have a public hearing, you have 30 days.
This motion and matter is to authorize staff to publish notice 2 weeks before the next meeting. You will be having a hearing at that point in which to determine whether or not you want to become a GSP. From that stage, you then have 30 days to file with the state.
Okay, I gotcha.
And then you become final in 90 days.
Okay.
So just to be clear, that 30-day clock would be triggered by the adoption of the resolution to apply to be a GSA, not the public hearing if those occurred on different meetings.
Well, if you were to not adopt in November, and say you want to come back in December, I would advise you to renotice and have another hearing in December.
Okay.
Not just kick it over 1 month.
Okay.
I think we had a vote. Did we have a vote? Mr. Council, did we have a vote? Acceptable vote?
I believe so.
Thank you. We'll move on. Number 11. Hold on for a second. Does everybody here believe? Do you believe we had a successful
I don't
vote?
think we voted, did we?
Yeah, we did, but let's do it again.
Okay, because before we voted, I wanted to understand. I didn't want to commit my council to something that was more than what I understood.
Thank you. Let's do it again.
Okay.
Let's do it again. The motion was, one more time.
The motion was to modify staff recommendation to set the public hearing for our November meeting, but the balance of staff recommendation would stand.
You have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay, number 11, approval of budget for 2016.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I can back up. I would offer apology. I made a statement about Mr. Parker, and I didn't. I probably clumsily said it. It was not.
You owe him a beer.
Huh? What's that?
You owe him a beer.
Yeah, you can have two because I don't drink, so you can have both of them. Anyway, so apology. Didn't come out well. So let's make this quick. We have a staff based on direction from you last time. We talked a lot about grant funds. We felt internally as staff talking that we didn't have enough information, feel like we had enough cash flow to start doing drawdowns on grant funds, and so we have not appropriated or in this budget that you have, it's a $75,000 budget. We have not appropriated or allowed spending of any grant funds yet until we have a better idea of how this organization is going to work. So we have just budgeted the $75,000 that you five contributed, $15,000 apiece. Of that, you can see we have set aside about $30,000 to spend on legal expenses, $30,000 on a rate study. Again, that probably won't happen this year. It's probably going to be in the next year. But even the USGS study would be spent in the next year, in the next year's budget with those grant funds. So we've kind of pushed that forward because we just don't think we're ready. We didn't want to be cash short and reimburse agencies too quickly. So that was the thought process. If there's any questions you have about the budget, it is very much we're not sure. We're not spending any money right now. We're probably not going to spend too much in the near future. But we know this will get us through December, in essence.
Thank you. Let's open a public hearing. Anybody in the public have a comment about our budget?
I have a question. My question is, what is the status of the USGS recharge study?
I'm not sure that has anything to do pertinent with this particular agenda item.
Well, it was just mentioned by Mr. Christensen.
Mr. Parker, do you have an answer?
It hasn't started. There is a contract being circulated, so we hope it will start soon.
So the contract hasn't been signed yet?
Right. The scope and the money, though, has been set aside in the grant project.
Okay, and it's a 2 year...
It's a slow walking process.
I understand
yeah.
perfectly. But it's a 2-year study, is it not?
No, it's actually a 1-year study.
Good.
Thank you.
Hi, Anita Emsan. I have a question about the budget and the reimbursement. So if Kern County decided to take on the battle and spend an enormous amount of their money for a legal fight against the mutuals, why should they be reimbursed for that expense when Inyo, San Bernardino, the water district, and the city never decided to take on that battle. So I hope that when you go to reimburse funds back to agencies, that you take into consideration what the legal expenses were used for before you on this board take it back to your public and expect them to pay for a battle that maybe you did not decide to incur. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? We'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for comment, consideration, and a vote.
I move we approve the budget as stated.
I will second one question. I also want to clarify what we're approving. The staff recommendation, as I read it, is to approve the budget in the amount of $75,000 for the remainder of 2016. But the second page of the staff report includes a column for how the money might be spent in 2017, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear that we're not approving that 2017 column today. That's just some staff ideas at this point. We would still have to have discussion about reimbursement and other ways that we spend money in 2017.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. So second.
We have a motion, a second. If you're in favor of it, say aye. Aye. If you're opposed, say no. Okay, moving on. Discussion of obtaining legal counsel for the IWVGA.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Yes.
I'd just like to make an announcement that we are canceling the Indian Wells Valley Cooperative Groundwater Management meeting, which was supposed to start at 1 o'clock.
Thank you very much.
And I think there was also a TAC meeting scheduled for this afternoon. And as I understand it, that is also canceled.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion of obtaining legal counsel for the IWVGA. Who's heading that up?
I guess I'll take it. At the last meeting, there was some discussion generally about what you wanted from legal counsel and how you had planned on obtaining legal counsel. I understand that Keith, that there was some concerns he had. I have not been able to fully obtain what those concerns were because they were dropped off with me Friday night as he had to go to a meeting. And since then, I've been out of the office sick. So I'm not exactly sure what those are. They might just be that we're going to need to get conflict waivers and that those will have to go through everybody. Technically, the conflict waiver could be with this board alone, but I think given the magnitude of this, you'll probably want to see retainer agreements and show them off to your respective boards and councils before this board acts. Aside from that, unless you have some advice, direction that you'd like to give us.
What's your recommendation at the present time?
Come back in November with representation agreements, or maybe even sooner. Actually, well, October. Come back, excuse me, yeah, I'm a month ahead here. Come back in October with representation agreements for final adoption. Probably pass them out to everybody before then so they can get them out to their various boards.
Great. Thank you very much. Public hearing. Anybody have a comment about that? Close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for comment, consideration, and a vote.
Are we taking action?
I think that, well, I don't know if we need a motion,
No.
but I think I agree with coming back in October with more
So there's
detail.
no vote required?
No vote needed.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on. Is there other conversations we'd like to have about that? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Report on well depths in the Indian Wells Valley by Kern County Water Agency. You've been sitting there all day.
Thank you, Michelle.
Do you have a presentation?
Michelle Anderson, Kern County Water Agency. We'll get the presentation up. I do want to make a brief announcement. I do not believe the Indian Wells Valley TAC meeting was canceled. They are still planning on meeting. The TAC meeting. Yes. And then where do I point the... Do I point that way, Tim, or which way to change?
Yeah, just point it. I think it works no matter where you point it.
Okay. We'll start with USBR 10. I will be presenting 3 hydrographs today. And we will start with number 10. Oh, that started with number 1. Did you shorten the?
It should keep clicking.
It just, okay. Oops, excuse me. This is USBR number 10. This hydrograph shows a fairly consistent water level decline of about 0.2 foot per year since 1994. And in 2004, the Technical Advisory Committee redeveloped this well. And you'll see that the difference in the water levels after that redevelopment. The next hydrograph we'll look at is USBR number 5. This well is located west of Highway 395, and this hydrograph shows a fairly consistent water level decline of about a foot per year. And the last graph we'll look at is USBR number 2. And this hydrograph shows a consistent water level decline of about half a foot per year since 1991. And that concludes my presentation. I will say we will make this presentation available online through the Cooperative Groundwater Management Group so that the rest of the graphs are available. And that concludes my presentation unless you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from board members?
I do.
Yes.
I know that you are measuring approximately 100 wells. Is it more than that?
189 wells twice a year.
Okay.
March and October, so we will be out again in October.
Have you seen, can you make any generalizations about those 189 wells that are they generally going down? Are they generally static? What are we seeing?
Yes, generally, if you average the water level decline over the entire valley, again, it's an average, is about half a foot a year.
When you see these well measurements, do you draw any conclusions by them, like where they are specifically? Is it more declining here rather than there rather than here? Can you address that?
Just the average is taken over the entire valley. Do you want to repeat?
Okay, well, because we've heard people say,
right.
And I've heard many of them say, some of them wells that you are measuring of dropping 2 and more feet a year. Those people that are saying that, are they in a specific area that needs more attention, better work? Tell me less
There are
impact.
areas where water levels are declining at a higher rate. The average over the valley is the half a foot. So I can't, based on this presentation today, I can't tell you exactly where the larger drawdowns are, but that would be something for the TAC to look at.
When I asked for this item to be on the agenda, I'd hoped that you would not be able to give us all 189 wells, but more than a couple, so that we could generally see wells that are located here, there, and there, that we could draw somewhat efficient conclusions based on what we saw. And maybe when you have your new measurements come out that you do in October, could you come back to us with a larger sampling of what you see and any conclusions you saw thereof? Also, are you doing any quality measurements?
Water quality measurements? No, the agency does not take
Okay.
water quality measurements.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Any comments from the public? Yes, sir. If we could kindly keep our comments concise. We're all hungry.
Don Decker. This is a comment to Peggy through the chair. The one thing that you need to ask the water agency for is the contour map that has been presented previously. It's long overdue. Typically, we've seen those maps with data that's 5 years out of date, and it is not current. The number of us who have the capability have, in fact, plotted the raw data and have our own contour maps, but those maps are not something that have any official recognition. The water agency has its reasons for these delays, and I'm sure it's funding. However, the fact of the matter is we do not have current data for the kind of thing that you're talking about, Peggy. 5 years is a long time, and I stand by what I just said.
I'd like to reply to that
Yes, please.
comment. Water level maps are produced on an annual basis. They are not 5 years out of date. Currently, the 2016 spring measurement maps are with the TAC for review and will be published on the website as soon as I get a review back from the TAC.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from any board members? Are you satisfied?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Manovsky.
Bill Manowski, again, I have another copy of my summary of the well data from the Water District. Again, the wells are in 3 locations. The ones closest to town are actually coming up. The ones in Buttermilk Acres are going down a couple inches a year. The ones in the southwest well field are those ones that are showing the 1 foot decline. I'll give this to you right now.
Cool.
It has a map.
Thanks, sir. You just hand it to me. Hand it to me.
There's the map and the data. And the data recent.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Do we have a vote on this one, or is it just recognition, or just thanking them for the information? Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item. Any other comments? I don't want to short. Any other comments on well depths? On how we're getting the data and what the value of that data is to us? Is there anything we'd like to see it shaped? Any story we'd like this data to tell us? I'm satisfied. I'd like to see a little more. I agree with what Peggy said. Okay, moving on. Closing comments. Closing comments? My closing comments. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just back on our conversation we first started off with, for those that are out there, I should have said it earlier and I realized now afterwards I didn't. Those are out there that are on domestic wells that are worried about the 2 acre foot. 2 acre foot per acre is what's generally considered to be a fairly robust domestic use. So if you have a well and you have a house, you're probably going to be under 2 acre foot. But I thought I should let that know because, being in the water world, we kind of forget, people don't really understand that sometimes. So should have said it earlier, but.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Anyone else closing comments?
Can I add
Yes,
to
ma'am.
that? I used to serve on the Water District, and I know it's probably changed since that time, but at that time the average household usage was 0.86 acre feet a year. I don't know if it's changed, sir. Anybody know that? Okay. But 2 acre feet is...
Yeah, that's why I said robust. It used to be kind of a number that was thrown out there.
Right.
I've never really heard it go above 2.
Bob.
I'm the alternate director for Inyo County. Our primary director, Matt Kingsley, sends his apologies for not being able to attend today. He won't be able to attend our October meeting, but then we'll resume with our third Thursday of the month schedule, and he expects to be able to make the rest of that schedule.
Tell Matt we said hi.
Okay.
Any other comments? We're going to have to make improvements on the efficiencies of how we conduct this meeting. We've been here for 3.5 hours, gone through everybody's lunch, canceled all these things, and I'll take that on board. And we're going to try to either by reducing public comment, reducing number of agenda items, somehow we're going to make these meetings more efficient. But you understand we have a lot of stuff to do. So my apologies and my thanks to the public for staying with us. Thank you very much. This motion, I need a motion to adjourn. Adjourn.